Sup folks, this is the final part, the part 7, of What If Deku was a Quirkless Villain, Chapter 32. Back at UA, Mirio was pacing back and forth in the next room over from Miria's to not worry her. I can feel Shigaraki's presence, Mirio thought as he clenched his fist. Mirio pulled out his phone and called All Might over so he could talk to him in private. A few minutes later, All Might and Mirio sat in the room where Eri was sleeping and had a long overdue conversation. I need to get out there, All Might, Mirio said. Mirio, have faith in the pros, they got this, All Might said, trying to reassure his successor. Mirio knew the pros could handle the villains, but what worried him was the feeling of Shigaraki awakening. Shigaraki, all for one's successor has awakened. I felt him just a few minutes ago, Mirio explained. What did you feel? All Might asked, concerned. Almost like a shiver or a sting go down my spine. I don't know how to explain it. Almost as if his presence entered the world itself, Mirio replied, placing his hands together. All Might took a long pause and looked over at the window, taking the time to hear the birds chirping nearby. Get your hero costume. It's your job as the new symbol of peace to take down this threat, All Might said firmly. Thank you, All Might. I'll make you and Sir proud, Mirio said with a smile as he stood up. Mirio left the room and left Eri in the hands of All Might as he prepared himself to fight Shigaraki in the final showdown against good and evil. Back at the raid on the mansion, there were muffled noises of abilities going off and shouting as Midoriya looked down and noticed he was standing on top of the beaten-up body of Himiko Toga. Midoriya's hands were covered in blood as he turned to look at the group of villains who were approaching him with caution. The Carmen CO commander is down. I repeat, the Carmen CO commander is down, the villains shouted into his radio. He's a monster, a woman said as she cautiously made her way toward Midoriya. I know, Midoriya whispered. Midoriya noticed that Gigantomachia was pushing back the heroes slowly and Mountain Lady tried her best to hold the beast back. Midoriya felt a shiver come over him as if someone had entered his mind. He's here, the voices whispered. Midoriya heard a fiery explosion that came from the hospital up in the mountain. Shigaraki is moving southwest, be on alert, Endeavor said over the radio. I cannot allow a single one escape, Midoriya said as he began to walk toward Gigantomachia. Hey, you're not going anywhere, the villain shouted as she activated her quirk, hardening her arm to punch Midoriya. Move, Midoriya said as he placed his hand in front of the villain's face and activated his air cannon, launching her back, crashing into the mansion. The villains backed off after that attack and went off to fight someone else who wouldn't put them in a coma or break all their bones. But first, Midoriya said as he turned around and picked up the bloodied Toga and dragged her to the hero's side. The villains watched as Midoriya dragged Toga's body to the police, who were putting others in cuffs way in the back. Dabi, Compress, and many others were riding on the back of Gigantomachia when they noticed Midoriya dragging Toga's body over to the other side. What do we do? Spinner asked. Well, we can't just go down there. It's a war zone, Dabi added. I can take care of him, Compress said. No, you can't. Do you want to end up like Toga? Spinner said sternly. Compress sighed and watched as his teammate was dragged through the dirt like a dog over to the hero's side. Extra security, Midoriya said as he tossed Toga over. Right away, the policeman said as he handcuffed Toga, and a nearby medic began to treat her wounds. What happened to this one? Did she get hit by a train? The medic asked as she washed her up and treated her wounds. That guy happened, the policeman said, pointing at Midoriya, who making his way toward the field. Midoriya could be seen beating down anyone who got in his way, even pushing some heroes to the side. Cracked ribs, broken arm, shattered hand, and her left leg is broken. This isn't how a hero should act, the medic said as she treated Toga. Midoriya was walking toward Gigantomachia when his radio went off and he heard the voice of Mirio. Hope you guys left some for me, Mirio said over the radio. Midoriya turned to look at the heroes, who were surprised to hear Mirio's voice and his revelation. I know many of you doubt me because of my current condition, but just know I'm not as powerless as I may seem, Mirio said. Be careful, Lemillion. You can explain this later, but for now let's get this done. Aizawa said over the radio. Midoriya soon made his way over to Gigantomachia and noticed he was about to kill a hero by stepping on them, while fighting. Overclock, Midoriya sped up and pulled the hero out just in time. Thanks. The hero grunted in pain as he fell back. I can't let you through. Mount Lady shouted. Strengthened air cannon. Midoriya used his air cannon to boost himself up to Gigantomachia's face and punched him, sending him flying a few feet back. The villains on Gigantomachia back jumped off and retreated just before being crushed. The battlefield turned to look at the scene before them as the large brute was on his back. He launched that thing back? Mount Lady asked, surprised, catching her breath. That monster was pushed back? Gaten thought as he looked over at Midoriya. At least who's on our side? Midnight said over the radio. Well, there is nothing we can do, so just keep your distance from them, and if you can support him and then do so, if not stay back. Cementos said over the radio. The villains who had been on Gigantomachia's back slipped into the forest unseen, using Gigantomachia as a distraction. Midoriya watched as Gigantomachia got up and looked down at Midoriya. A fake. Gigantomachia whispered. Gigantomachia threw a punch at Midoriya which destroyed the terrain, but to his surprise, he missed and noticed Midoriya was already up in his face. Master, why is there a fake? Gigantomachia shouted as he tried to bite Midoriya in half like an animal. Settle down. Midoriya said as he dodged using air cannon. Midoriya watched as the monster began to weep and thrash around like a baby in front of him. A fake, a fake. I must destroy you. There is only one I acknowledge, Gigantomachia said as he launched himself toward Midoriya. You're just a dog. Midoriya said as he clashed with the beast using his air cannon, pushing him back slightly. So weak. Gigantomachia said with a wicked smile. Gigantomachia pulled the ground beneath him and launched Midoriya in the air. Midoriya tried to grapple back to safety, but a sharp pain stopped him in his tracks. AGH Midoriya groaned in pain as he felt his head was about to burst. You lose. Gigantomachia said with a grin as he punched Midoriya mid-air, sending him flying backward at high speed. Midoriya felt his right arm and ribs shatter as he flew miles away from Gigantomachia. Yay, we got him. The villains cheered. There is no way anyone could have survived that. Midnight thought. The students in the back line were watching the fight unfold when they noticed a figure flying toward them. Watch out! Jiro shouted. The students and pros in the back took cover and waited until the coast was clear. Crash, is everyone alright? Mina asked. Everyone gave a thumbs up and they all took a look at the hooded person that was a few feet in front of them. There is something big fighting the heroes. Jiro said. He is not dead, is he? Tokaj asked, back at the front lines. He's too strong. Mount Lady shouted. Gigantomachia grabbed and threw her to the side like it was nothing. Yo, big guy, pick us up. Dabi shouted. Gigantomachia grabbed the league members and put them on his back. He can't get away. Midnight said as she was being carried by Kamui to try and put the beast to sleep. Dabi used his flames and burnt Kamui and Midnight, but not before Midnight went flying toward Gigantomachia at the last second. Oh no, you don't. Compress said as he used some marbles to spawn some debris and stopped Midnight midair. So you think you can stop this? All for one said. Midoriya looked at the gray-haired man standing beside him. Shigaraki is still getting used to his power, but you won't be able to stop him. All for one said with a grin. What do you want? Midoriya asked in a cold voice. Nothing, I'm just enjoying the show. All for one replied. Midoriya felt a wave of pressure come over him as he looked over in the distance and saw a skinny figure oozing bloodlust. There he is. My successor. All for one said. Wake up. A woman whispered. You have to stop him. The pigtail girl said. Kirishima walked up cautiously and was stopped dead in his tracks when the hooded figure got up. Gasped Midoriya felt a cold sweat in muffled voices speaking nearby. He's bigger than Shoji said. Where is the enemy? Midoriya asked. The huge guy is that way, but we have a plan to take him out, Kirishima said, pointing over to Yaozu, who was making some sort of vial. Help those in the front lines, please, we can handle this. Kirishima said, "Alright." Midoriya said, regenerating his broken arm. The students watched as a large gust of wind launched Midoriya back to the front lines. Was that the unknown guy in the front lines that they were talking about? Kuroro asked. The fight raged on and everyone had assumed the hooded man had been defeated when suddenly a large group of villains was launched back. What was that? A villain asked. It can't be. Cementos said as he noticed Midoriya standing on top of a villain. When the dust settled, both sides were surprised to see Midoriya still alive. The ice user Gaten was launching large waves of ice when he heard the screams of the soldiers. The hooded guy is still alive? Gaten said angrily. What do we do? He's pushing us back, some villains asked. Aghits all a mess. Gaten said, frustrated. Gaten was trying his best to take out as many heroes as he could, but with Midoriya knocking down his walls of ice, there wasn't much he could do unless he went for a one-on-one battle in a crowd where Midoriya couldn't attack him recklessly. Screw it, I'll kill these dogs myself, Gaten said as he charged in. Gaten was about to go all out when he heard a large boom come from his right side. He's coming. A villain shouted, there you are. Gaten said with a smile. Midoriya broke the sound barrier as he had used air cannon at max power to launch himself toward Gaten, just like I thought. Try and dodge this, Gaten said as he quickly turned and launched an ice spear at Midoriya. Midoriya wouldn't have been able to dodge normally, but overclock also sped up his mind, allowing him to think at hyperspeed. Midoriya used his air cannon to slightly shift his place in the air, but the spear ripped off his hood completely. Another one down, Midoriya said as he grabbed Gaten by his face and slammed him into the ground with a loud boom. Midoriya rose up from the dust and looked down at the ice user. Everyone on the battlefield could see his green hair and green eyes. Midoriya? Cementos said in shock as he looked at the green-haired boy who stood on top of the villain. Don't think I'm done yet, Gaten said, getting up. An ice shield could be seen covering Gaten's face and then crumbling, revealing his bloodied face. I'm going to kill you and liberate the world, Gaten shouted. Midoriya didn't reply and stared down Gaten with cold, dead eyes. Gaten summoned a large ice wall that was the size of a 12-story building. Break this one, Gaten said with a cocky smile. Run, it will kill us all, a villain shouted. Midoriya made a gun shape with his hand and pointed it at Gaten. Air cannon, I am free, Midoriya said in a bloodthirsty voice as shot Gaten, breaking his right arm. AGH. Gaten screamed in pain. The large wall of ice came falling down, but Midoriya used air cannon to repel the ice, breaking it apart into tiny pieces. Gaten was on the ground trying to crawl away after witnessing his ultimate attack being repelled. You don't deserve this either, Midoriya said as he walked up to Gaten and placed his hand on the man's face. Midoriya raised Gaten up and in front of both heroes and villains. Much to Midoriya's surprise, Gaten knew what was coming. Please, don't do this. It's all I have, Gaten pleaded. Now you have nothing, Midoriya said in a cold voice. Midoriya stole his quirk and Gaten fell to his knees, broken in front of his soldiers. Midoriya felt as if his head was about to burst after that stunt. The time limit was 5 minutes. Silence fell upon the battlefield as Midoriya lifted up Gaten and ordered him to go and turn himself into the police. The only sound that could be heard was the crashing of Gigantomachia in the forest nearby. Chapter 33. Midoriya felt his head throb in pain after stealing such a strong quirk. Tch, this pain is nothing, Midoriya said as he looked over at Gigantomachia, who was finally starting to slow down. The morale of the villain side had gone down, but it wasn't enough to make them surrender. Many were still willing to die for the cause. Comms are down. Must be the work of someone's quirk, Cementos said. Midoriya looked over at Cementos and ran over towards the hero. Where is the doctor? Midoriya asked. The one behind Shigaraki and the Namu. He's in our custody with the others, Cementos said. Cementos then noticed Midoriya's eyes were the same as the day he met him for the first time. All right, Midoriya said as headed in another direction. What happened to you, Midoriya? Cementos said as he watched Midoriya. A few minutes later, Midoriya was heading toward Mirio's location when he stopped to catch his breath when he noticed how much blood was on his costume and hands. "I can do this," Midoriya said as he looked ahead. The slight shake in Midoriya's hands however told a different story. Elsewhere, Mirio was heading towards the explosions and finally caught a glimpse of the fight. Shigaraki was barely being held back. Byakugan and Endeavor were still fighting Shigaraki when he arrived, but Truki had been knocked out. "One for all. He's here," Shigaraki said with a twisted smile. Mirio was already in Shigaraki's face when he punched him, launching the villain back. "I'll try to keep him in your sight, Eraser," Mirio said over the radio. Shigaraki was still going strong as he kept all the heroes at bay with his modified body. "Come to me, one for all," Shigaraki said with a smile as he looked over at Mirio. Mirio used one for all to launch himself toward Shigaraki. "One for all, give it to me, little brother," Shigaraki said as he clashed with Mirio. Mirio's eyes widened as he punched Shigaraki back with all his might. Shigaraki used air cannon to stop his momentum and looked over at Mirio. "You're so stubborn, master, but this is my will and my body. I'm going to kill everyone here and do what you couldn't," Shigaraki cackled. Midoriya was heading toward the city when he began to feel the strain of all-for-one usage taking a toll on his body and mind. The adrenaline had been keeping him afloat, but now that he had a chance to catch his breath, it was coming at him all at once. Midoriya felt his brain pulse along with the rest of his body in pain. "Agh," Midoriya said in pain as he placed his hands on his head. Although Midoriya was keeping the number of quirks down, he could still feel all the memories and quirks fill up his mind. "Come on, you can do this," Midoriya said to himself as he slowly got up but collapsed soon after. Midoriya landed on the fresh grass and passed out. "You've always been alone, but why?" Midoriya's voice echoed. The memories of Midoriya's youth flashed as he remembered all the times he ate alone, played by himself in the park, and the times he was abandoned by all the others. "Even now you're alone. If you were to die in this field, no one would notice until it was all over." Midoriya's voice echoed. "If you were still weak, would those at you even know you exist? The friends you've made only acknowledge your strength. If you didn't have this power, you would be left alone like before. You have no other use other than fighting. Stop lying to yourself." Midoriya's voice echoed. Midoriya was in a void when he heard crying from the distance. A young Midoriya sat alone with tears in his eyes. "Why am I thinking about this now?" Midoriya asked himself as he approached the child. Before Midoriya could approach the boy, he walked into the darkness and disappeared. "You can lie to yourself all you want. It doesn't change anything. Play hero all you want, but you know what you are." Midoriya's voice echoed. A loud boom could be heard as Byakugan let loose one of his gauntlets. Mirio, Aizawa, Endeavor, Manuel, Byakugan, Rocklock, and even Shigaraki turned to look at Midoriya. "You're just a villain," Midoriya's voice echoed. Midoriya looked jaded, almost as if he was dreading this very moment. He knew something that the others didn't. "I'm sorry," Midoriya whispered. "Problem child, get over here and help," Mirio shouted as he dashed toward Shigaraki. "Glad you're here, Midoriya," Aizawa said, keeping his eyes on Shigaraki. Midoriya looked over at Aizawa, who gave him a smile and a nod. The fight was still difficult since Shigaraki's body had been modified, making him inhumanly strong. Midoriya had decided to refrain from using all-for-one since he had begun to reach its upper limit, and Mirio was the front line against Shigaraki. "Shigaraki," Midoriya said as he grappled toward Shigaraki, "you are so annoying," Shigaraki said angrily. Shigaraki prepared to punch Midoriya but missed, only hitting the gauntlet and breaking it. "Shit," Midoriya said as he tossed the broken gauntlet aside. "You heroes destroy your," Shigaraki was about to say when he was kicked in the face by Midoriya. "You talk too much," Midoriya said as he stared Shigaraki down. "I'm losing my firepower," Endeavor said over the radio. "Shigaraki, your evil ends here," Mirio said as he punched Shigaraki in the stomach. Back at the raid, the Udate students stood defeated as the plan to use a tranquilizer had failed to take down Gigantomachia. "What do we do?" Mina asked. "He's unbeatable," Mineta said. Loud booms could be heard in the distance as Gigantomachia steamrolled the cities. Midoriya's radio picked up the frequency and he heard the words that he was dreading. "The large villain tearing through the city toward you guys." Tenya said over the radio. "No no no," Midoriya said as his heart dropped. Midoriya began to think about all the deaths that would be on his hands as a result of Gigantomachia being set loose. The beaten-up Shigaraki coughed up blood and stared at everyone with a blood-filled smile. "It's over now," Shigaraki said laughing. "This is all my fault," Midoriya whispered as he fell to his knees. "Finally I win." Shigaraki shrieked maniacally as he shot toward Aizawa and clawed his eyes, blinding him. "Don't you fucking dare look this weak in front of me," Bakagu said as he punched Midoriya in the jaw. Midoriya placed a hand on his jaw and looked over at Bakagu. "Get up and help us get this bastard," Bakagu said as he grabbed Midoriya by his arm. A large gust of wind and explosion pushed everyone back as Bakagu launched Midoriya toward Shigaraki at high speed, allowing him to punch a hole into his chest. "That quirk you have is a fake," Shigaraki said with a bloody smile. The hole Midoriya made in Shigaraki quickly healed itself with the help of the regeneration quirk. Midoriya was finally composed again as he pulled his arm out and made some distance between himself and Shigaraki. What can't tell Shigaraki was about to say when he was punched in the jaw by Mirio. The shockwave from Mirio's punch shook the ground and Shigaraki began to get impatient. The villain growled and dashed toward Mirio, but before he could reach him he was blasted in the ribs by Bakagu, launching him away. "We need to end this soon. That large villain cannot arrive before we beat Shigaraki," Mirio said as he powered up. Midoriya looked at Shigaraki, then over at Mirio and Bakagu, who were fixated on the villain. "How do I do this?" Midoriya asked himself. Shigaraki knew Mirio, Midoriya, and Bakagu were going to be hard to kill as they were more skilled in terms of hand-to-hand combat and had quirks that allowed them to dodge his decay. "Oh well, may as well kill the spectators," Shigaraki said with a smile as he placed his hand on the floor and activated decay. Shigaraki's right arm and shoulder blade split open, spraying blood out in every direction. However, as soon as he activated the quirk, Shigaraki said, "His body can't handle it, Deku. Aizawa told me he was forcefully broken out of his tube." Mirio said over his radio, "He's incomplete, but he's still able to cause this much damage in such a short amount of time." Midoriya replied, "There we go, now to end this," Shigaraki said as he raised his hand after regenerating. At that moment a large mountain of ice blasted Shigaraki back. Todoroki looked over at the trio as he melted the ice on his body. "What's the situation?" Todoroki asked. "We have some injuries in the back and your father is overheating, which is bringing his effectiveness down. The villain has a decaying quirk which destroys anything even if debris touches you. It's over. SP try to stop him from touching the ground with his hand. Along with that he has many other quirks in his arsenal," Midoriya explained. "Use this to cool down," Todoroki said as he created ice around his father. "This will be enough." Endeavor said, "Don't get in my way." Half and half, Bakagu said. "Midoriya, get the injured away from here for now," Mirio said firmly. Midoriya nodded and made his way over to Aizawa and the others. "We have to get you away from here for now. I'll be back for the rest of you in a second," Midoriya said as he picked up Aizawa and went in a different direction of the fight. "This job sucks sometimes," Aizawa said with his eyes closed. Midoriya looked down at Aizawa, who was bleeding profusely. "Don't worry Aizawa, I got this, so rest up," Midoriya said. "I know you do, kid," Aizawa said, letting out a sigh of relief. Midoriya used Aizawa's binding cloth to slow down the bleeding. "I'm going for the others," Midoriya said as he laid Aizawa down hidden amongst some trees. A few minutes later, Midoriya had picked up the downed heroes and placed them alongside with Aizawa. "We got it from here. Go and get that son of a bitch," Rocklock said. However, before Midoriya could leave, Rocklock grabbed his arm. "Make sure you kids don't die," Rocklock said as he let go. Midoriya nodded and made his way back to the others. Shigaraki was fighting against Mirio and Todoroki when he finally made some space between himself to finally use decay at 100%. However, As soon as his hand was about to touch the ground, Bakugo used his gauntlet to fire a blast at him. Die! Bakugo shouted as he pulled the pin. Huh? Shigaraki said as he was blown away. Midoriya saw his chance and began to make his way toward Shigaraki along with the others. Now we need to attack him now. Mirio shouted as he shot toward Shigaraki. Shigaraki began to heal very slowly and he looked at Bakugo in contempt. Just die already. Shigaraki shouted with a twisted smile. Mirio punched the air behind himself and used the air pressure to propel himself toward Shigaraki at high speed. Your fight is with me, Mirio said as he rammed into Shigaraki. From the dust Shigaraki appeared and lunged at Mirio like a rabid animal. Shut up! Shigaraki shouted. Shigaraki clashed with Mirio and tried to use decay, but Mirio dodged his hands and landed a knee to his stomach, causing him to cringe in pain. I'm going to destroy it all, Shigaraki said, coughing up blood. Don't act like we're not here, Bakugo shouted as he blasted Shigaraki back. Now, Todoroki said as he made a shard of ice pierce Shigaraki. What should we do? His recovery is too potent and without Aizawa we can't do much, Todoroki said. Shigaraki was pulling out the ice shard as he looked at the group of heroes. If what you said is true and his body is incomplete, we need to wait for that moment to strike again, Midoriya said in a low voice. Todoroki nodded and looked over at his father Endeavor in the back, who was still cooling off. The others were also catching their breath in this moment. For now we should try our best to tire him out and wait for Endeavor to back us up, Todoroki said. The group nodded and looked over at Shigaraki, who was struggling to get up. Bakugo's gauntlet flashed red, indicating that his gauntlet was ready to be fired. We need to kill this fucker now, Bakugo said. You can't kill me, Shigaraki shouted with a twisted smile as he shot toward the group. I wanted to save this as a trump card, but we need to end this soon, Mirio said. When I launch him in the air, use your gauntlet, Mirio said. Black tendrils shot from Mirio's hands, grabbing Shigaraki and then throwing him into the air. Bakugo quickly aimed his gauntlet at Shigaraki and pulled the pin. The large explosion shot Shigaraki high up in the air, burning him. Midoriya however looked in horror at the black quips and Mirio, not because Mirio had used them but because this had confirmed Midoriya's fears and suspicions. Then it's, Midoriya said in a low voice. Yes, the voices whispered. Mirio used One for All to launch himself up toward Shigaraki and began to punch and kick him in midair. How can he? Bakugo asked, confused. Midoriya knew power such as One for All and All for One simply shouldn't exist, especially One for All. The stockpiling of power was only 9 generations in and it was already able to blow a town away. Where did this black whip quirk come from? A previous user, or was the quirk mutating? These questions rushed into Midoriya's mind as he watched Mirio. These quirks cannot exist, Midoriya whispered as he looked up Shigaraki and Mirio, who looked like gods fighting in the air with unimaginable power. Midoriya looked over at Endeavor, Todoroki, and Bakugo, who were amazed at the fight. Mirio used another quirk to maintain himself in the air and used his black whip to toss Shigaraki back into the air. This is the end, Shigaraki, Mirio shouted as he punched Shigaraki in the chest. The shockwave tore a hole into the clouds and silence flooded the battlefield. Shigaraki's limp body fell to the ground with a loud thud. It's over, Mirio said as he floated back to the ground. Shigaraki was unconscious and bleeding profusely from his right arm. The group was confused and unsure of what to do with the unconscious villain. We can't just leave him here, and it's not like we have what it takes to restrain him, Todoroki said. I agree. He is too dangerous to leave unchecked. Endeavor added. He won't be out for long, we need backup, Mirio added as he looked over at Shigaraki. Midoriya began to slowly walk over to the unconscious villain and stared for a few seconds. A garbled whisper could be heard faintly. We need to get ready for that monster making its way over here, Bakugo said. Gigantomachia was no more than a few miles away now, and they couldn't afford to deal with him and Shigaraki at the same time. Not yet, Shigaraki said in a low voice. Not yet, Shigaraki shouted as he lunged at Midoriya. Midoriya, said as he grabbed Shigaraki's wrists and stopped him inches away from his face. "I'm not going to get a game over now," Shigaraki shouted with a crazed look in his eye. "Do it?" a voice shouted. Everyone felt a chill run down their spine when Midoriya placed his hand on Shigaraki's forehead and slammed it into the hard ground. Shigaraki looked in horror at Midoriya as he stood over him with cold, lifeless eyes. "No," Shigaraki said, a shaky voice. "Midoriya, what are you doing?" Mirio said, "It must be done," Midoriya said as he placed his hand on Shigaraki's head. Shigaraki couldn't lift his arms as they had been severely injured. The pain that Shigaraki had endured acquiring All for One was going to be for nothing, and there was nothing he could do to stop Midoriya. A burst of air emanated from Midoriya as he began to steal everything from Shigaraki. "No!" Shigaraki shouted. "Shut up!" Midoriya said as he punched Shigaraki in the face. Midoriya lifted Shigaraki with one hand and took all the quirks he had inside him. Midoriya's right eye filled up with blood as he proceeded to take All for One from Shigaraki. The group was shocked to the point of being unable to move as they watched Midoriya. During that time Shigaraki's arms had finally healed. "Die," Shigaraki said with a smile as he placed his right hand on Midoriya's chest. Shigaraki felt his heart sink when he noticed Midoriya would not disintegrate. All the power he had fought and suffered for was now gone. "Die, die, die," Shigaraki said as he repeatedly kept placing his hand on Midoriya. Midoriya felt his head splitting as he finally let go of Shigaraki. "Deku, what was that?" Mirio asked, demanding answers. Midoriya stood in place and ignored Mirio. "Hey! Deku! What the fuck was that?" Bukage shouted as he grabbed Midoriya's shoulder and turned him around. Midoriya's right eye was cloudy and full of blood as he stared at Bukage blankly. "My god!" Endeavor said as soon as Bukage had turned Midoriya around. Midoriya fell to his knees and fell to the ground as a pool of blood began to stain the ground. Bukage's faint voice was all he could hear as he passed out. Chapter 34. All in your head. Midoriya heard muffled blasts and shouting when he began to open his eyes. Midoriya however noticed something was off as he closed one eye and noticed he was now blind in his right eye. "As a fucking tank!" Bukage shouted. Gigantomachia and some villains were fighting with Todoroki, Bukage, Endeavor, and Mirio. "Master, where are you?" Gigantomachia cried. "We meet again, Endeavor," Dabi said. "Let me take over and get rid of this trash." A sinister voice echoed. Midoriya looked over and set his eyes on Gigantomachia, the presence that had taken over him, although not entirely. It was controlling only his thoughts, but that was more than enough to influence his actions. Gigantomachia was destroying everything around to find his master until he was suddenly launched backward. "Master, is that you?" Gigantomachia asked as he looked up. "No, it's not," Midoriya said. "It is you, master," Gigantomachia said with tears in his eyes. Midoriya floated down to the ground and looked into a cracked mirror on the ground, inspecting his right eye, and noticed the right side of his hair had begun to turn white. What happens now is inevitable. "You should have just killed Shigaraki." All for One's voice echoed in Midoriya's mind. "Midoriya!" Bukage shouted but was ignored. Midoriya began to walk toward the villain slowly and a large gust of wind began to emanate from his body. "Master, I'm so happy," Gigantomachia said as he bowed toward Midoriya, who was walking toward him. "So Endeavor, we finally have a chance to talk," Dabi shouted. Dabi Endeavor said, "Don't call me that, call me by my real name." "Tuya," Dabi said with a smile as he poured a liquid, changing his dyed hair back to normal. "Brother Tuya," Todoroki said, surprised. "I know my face is messed up, but I'm hurt that you didn't recognize me the first time," Dabi said with a twisted smile. Midoriya looked up at Dabi and wasn't as surprised. He knew Dabi's hate for Endeavor went far beyond normal. "As we speak, my story and your evil is being broadcasted to the world, Father," Dabi said. "I planned to wait till Shido became a model hero. Then I would kill him, but you became the #1 hero. I couldn't let you enjoy your place." Dabi explained. "Did you just think because you were #1 and looked to the future all your past sins would be forgiven? Those 30 innocent dead are on your hands now. It's time for your wake-up call." The past never forgets. Come dance in hell with me Enji Todoroki, with your son Dabi said maniacally. Midoriya had heard enough, and as much as he agreed Endeavor deserved to pay for his deeds, Dabi still stood in his way and needed to be put down. I've heard enough, Midoriya said. In the blink of an eye Midoriya was in front of Dabi and placed his hand in front, blasting him with air cannon, AGH. Dabi said as he smashed into a wall in the near distance, "You big idiot, do something." Skeptic said, kicking Gigantomachia, "But I can't hurt master." Gigantomachia said, conflicted, "Your childish tantrum ends here Dabi, or should I say to ya? Which do you prefer?" Midoriya said as he walked up to Dabi who was on the ground, "You think this will stop me?" Midoriya. Dabi said with a crooked smile. Dabi knew all about Midoriya and his past, where he lives and who he holds dear. "That's right Midoriya, step away or your mother will be dead by tomorrow," Dabi said as he stood up. "You make a great point," Midoriya said. Dabi sneered at Midoriya and looked ahead at Endeavor, "But you are all going to be on the ground before that can happen." Midoriya said, "I'm sorry about your mother," Dabi said, cackling. Midoriya dashed toward Dabi and punched him in the throat at high speed, but not enough to kill him. "Maybe a body bag will suit you more," Midoriya said as he looked at Dabi, with a twisted smile. "I can't," Dabi said, coughing as he struggled to speak. "Don't kill him," Endeavor begged. Shut the fuck up," Dabi shouted at Endeavor. Midoriya grabbed Dabi by his collar and threw him against the store shop window. "So much for your plan of revenge," Midoriya said. Midoriya soon set his eyes on Gigantomachia when he heard a voice calling to him. "Toga had asked me if you ever considered us human," Spinner said as he jumped from Gigantomachia's back. "No," Midoriya said. "Eh?" Spinner replied, surprised at that answer. "No, you are not human. How many have you killed? Innocents that have nothing to do with this world of heroes you hate so much. You're all going to be behind bars soon anyway," Midoriya said. There was a pause and Midoriya's demeanor changed once again. "I have finally come to a conclusion. The true solution has finally come to me," Midoriya said, walking toward the villains with a twisted smile. "This isn't good," Todoroki said. "I must set an example. An eye for an eye seems fair, right? Unfortunately, I can't kill you more than once," Midoriya said as he looked at the group of villains cold-faced. "Listen to him, he seems like himself, yet at times it's like he's another person." Mirio added, "Master, these servants can prove useful," Gigantomachia said. Midoriya looked over at Gigantomachia and punched him back a few yards, causing a large shockwave. Midoriya's fist was bleeding after the punch, but as he lifted his arm it healed instantly. The villains on Gigantomachia's back jumped off just in time before they were crushed. "You asked me if I considered you all humans, and I ask, how could you be humans? You're all murderers. I heard Hawks killed twice, but twice was like a child running around with a knife. His quirk was too strong and dangerous, it needed to be taken away even if it meant his death," Midoriya said. The villain stared at Midoriya, taking a few steps back. "Yes, you're all children running around with knives, and I can barely stand to watch. If you must die, so be it, but please just come quietly and surrender," Midoriya said. "But please do resist," Midoriya said with a smile. "All for one," Mirio whispered as he heard those words come out of Midoriya's mouth. Mirio finally pieced together what was going on with Midoriya. All for one was trying to claw his way into a new body. "Starting with you, come here quietly and this will all be over," Midoriya said as he walked over to Compress. "Don't get cocky," Compress said as he threw a small marble at Midoriya, which decompressed into a large boulder. Midoriya placed his hand in front of him and disintegrated the entire boulder as it came into contact with his hand. "What horrible quirk, but it has its uses, I suppose," Midoriya said as he brushed some dust off his clothes. "Shigaraki's quirk," Compress said, trembling. "Let's say for a second that you win this war and achieve your goal. Be realistic, what will you do?" Midoriya asked. "We will fix this society and set everyone free." Skeptic said, "Free? You want to use this freely?" Midoriya shouted as he punched the air above him and split the clouds and cracked the ground beneath him. The amount of power in that punch could have killed anyone who stood in its way. This thing you want to release will only breed destruction. Midoriya said, it's a basic human right for us to use it and we have been chained by heroes. Skeptic retorted. Midoriya shook his head and let out a sigh with a slight chuckle as he realized that no matter what he said the army would not back down. Well, no one can say I didn't try. Midoriya said with a shrug as he dashed toward Compress and punched him in the stomach, launching him back. Compress felt like one of his ribs shattered and soon began to cough up blood onto the concrete. Last warning. Please, just surrender and come quietly. Midoriya said to the rest of the villains. Deku. Mirio shouted. Midoriya turned around to face Mirio and realized that he was in a fighting stance. I know he's inside your head, he's making you do things you don't want to do. Mirio said, he is inside my head but this is my own choice. I realized when I heard that monster's loud footsteps that they were beyond help. How many innocents died as they made their way over here? The men, women, and children who perished. It's my duty to their families to exact revenge for them. Hawks was right, some people are too dangerous to be kept alive. Midoriya said as he looked over at Gigantomachia. Stop, Mirio said as he dashed toward Midoriya and clashed head-on. The shockwave of Midoriya and Mirio knocked everyone backward. The ground beneath them began to crack. Stop this Lamlion. Together we can save everyone. Midoriya shouted as he pushed Mirio back with his air cannon. Not like this. Mirio said, help us. The whispers begged, kill them all. All for one's voice echoed. Midoriya clenched his fist and slammed the ground, tearing it apart and making a crater. Shut up. Midoriya shouted. The ground began to shake and tear as if an earthquake had hit them. Something is wrong. I refuse to believe Midoriya is in total control at this moment. Todoroki said, I have to stop him. For now, take Shigaraki and arrest him, and as for the rest of the villains, I think they are going to retreat for now. Mirio said, come back to you. We will figure this out together. Mirio said as he walked up to Midoriya cautiously. Midoriya was back in control finally, but it wouldn't last. I'm barely holding it together. It's too late for me, but I know how to finally stop this endless fight. Midoriya said. Mirio had a bad feeling about what Midoriya was about to say. Give me one for all. I can stop it if you just give me that quirk. Trust me. Midoriya said as walked toward Mirio while extending a hand. No, I can't do that, and you know why. Mirio replied, please, you may not understand now, but this is necessary to finally achieve what the original holder of One for All wanted. Midoriya said, Master, please come to us. Gigantomachia pleaded. Midoriya clenched his fist and looked over at Gigantomachia. You're so loud. Midoriya said. It happened in a blink of an eye as Midoriya faced Gigantomachia and launched him back with an empowered air cannon. I'm not your master, so please be quiet. Midoriya said, annoyed. Gigantomachia began to bleed out of his nose after that attack, but even still he held no resentment toward Midoriya. As for the rest of you, go back into your holes like the rats you are. You will not achieve your dreams this day. I will come for you all someday soon, and forget about trying to rescue Dabi. He's mine. A pity twice died only for you to fail. Midoriya said as he made a shooing motion with his right hand. Don't underestimate us. Spinner shouted angrily as he dashed at Midoriya with two daggers in his hands. Midoriya sighed and turned around to face Spinner, who was coming toward him at high speed. Stop! Mirio shouted. Deku. Bukagoose said as he ran toward Midoriya. I told you it was your last chance. Midoriya said as he dodged Spinner and used a quirk that made his right hand into a blade and cut off the villain's leg. AGH. Spinner shouted in pain as he looked down at his right leg, which was cut clean off. Kill him. All for One shouted in his head. Midoriya's eye twitched and looked down at Spinner full of bloodlust. Wait. Spinner said, afraid. So you do enjoy being alive? Midoriya said with a scoff. Midoriya raised his hand over Spinner ready to finish him off when he felt a large heat wave on his right. Midoriya looked in the direction where he had thrown Dabi only to be met with a large wave of fire. Flash fire fist, son of a bitch, I'm not dead yet. Dabi said, spitting out some blood. Midoriya was launched backward and slammed against a wall. The right side of Midoriya's body had been burned off and was now missing an arm. He won't get up from that, Dabi said with a smirk as he cauterized Spinner's leg to stop the bleeding. Spinner passed out from the pain and fainted in Dabi's arm. Oi, what's with that power? Is he really your son? Bukigou said as he looked over at Endeavor. Someone go check on him fast, that amount of heat could have killed him. Endeavor said as he kept his eyes glued on Dabi, this is turning into a mess. Mirio said, and after all that power he showed off, he was just another piece of garbage. Skeptic said, indeed. Compress agreed, coughing. Now then. Back to my darling family. Dabi said with a smile as he darted toward Endeavor. The sound of a helicopter could be heard up above as heroes landed on the site. You're all going to burn, Dabi shouted as he prepared his ultimate attack only to be pinned down by wires. It's good to be back. Best, Genist said, don't forget about me. Najire said as she arrived. The villains were all pinned including Gigantomachia. You're supposed to be dead. I saw your body. Dabi shouted angrily. Dabi. Todoroki shouted as he launched himself toward his older brother. It doesn't matter how strong your binds are, Dabi said as he burned his restraints to ash and ran toward Todoroki. At that moment, many Namus began to pour out into the battlefield along with many other heroes. Save me, Gigantomachia. Shigaraki's voice echoed. Gigantomachia broke free of the binding and ran toward Shigaraki's, who was tied to a nearby tree. Gigantomachia broke through the hero's line and made his way to his master. Mirio was preoccupied trying to fight off the Namu and making a way for Bukigou to check on Midoriya. I can still give you orders, Shigaraki said with a cough as he was lifted by the beast. Shit, there's so many, Burning said as she tried her best to take out the Namu. Bukigou finally had a chance to go to Midoriya and nearly threw up at the scene. Midoriya's entire right side had melted away and there was a pool of blood surrounding his body. Midoriya, Bukigou said as he looked at the green-haired teen. Rage and sorrow built up in Bukigou as he looked over at Dabi, who was currently fighting Todoroki. Son of a bitch, Bukigou said as he looked at the villain who had a twisted smile. Bukigou was ready to go and fight Dabi when he suddenly stopped after hearing a familiar voice. What a pain, Midoriya said, annoyed. The dust cleared and everyone fell silent as Midoriya stood up and began to regenerate his missing right side. Fear fell upon everyone on the battlefield including Shigaraki. I gave you all one chance and you wasted just like that. Don't worry, it will be painless, I swear, Midoriya said calmly. Dabi had a look of horror in his eyes after seeing someone who he was sure he had killed alive and walking. Multiple Namu soon began to converge on Midoriya's location when they were suddenly turned into mincemeat in an instant by a simple wave of Midoriya's hand. Disgusting, Midoriya said. Just die, 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 die. Die already, Shigaraki said in a low voice. Shigaraki just didn't seem to get his way when it came to Midoriya and he finally snapped. Gigantomachia, kill him. I want him dead, 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 dead. R.I.P. him apart, Shigaraki shouted, maniacally. Gigantomachia didn't want to hurt Midoriya, but as long as Shigaraki commanded there was no stopping him. Yes, master. Gigantomachia launched himself toward Midoriya expecting to crush him only to be met by a blast of condensed air blast launching him back. Gah! I feel weak, Gigantomachia said. The anesthesia from earlier had finally begun to take effect. The efforts of the students in the mountain were not in vain. Overclock, how does it feel to be so weak? Midoriya said as he looked over at Gigantomachia. Midoriya jumped toward Gigantomachia and attacked with a quick fury of jabs. No villain or hero had ever seen Gigantomachia be pushed back so easily. This display of power showed everyone on what level Midoriya was on now. Gigantomachia's defense rose as he was pummeled by Midoriya, but to his surprise, he couldn't find an opening to attack, and with the anesthesia slowly taking effect he was slowing down. Gigantomachia shouted as he launched Midoriya back. Midoriya was launched upward but used a floating quirk to stop his descent and began to watch the fight from below. Some Class A students had arrived and were providing support. "Senpai, how is everyone?" Tenya asked Mirio. "I can't tell you really, everyone is off fighting on their own." "How's Nejire?" Mirio asked. Nejire had been burned recently in the fight and was unconscious. The burns were not too severe. "I'm sure she will be fine, but I left her in the care of other heroes nearby." Tenya explained. "That's good. For now just help anyone however you can with your speed," Mirio said, as he gave Tenya a friendly slap in the back. "I'm on it," Tenya said as he dashed away. Mirio looked up at Midoriya, who was simply observing. "Come on, problem child, you're stronger than him," Mirio said in a low voice. "Things aren't looking too good," Spinner said as he clenched his leg. Compress had snuck past the heroes and retrieved his comrade from custody in the mayhem. "Don't worry, as long as we have Gigantomachia nothing can stop us," Compress said, reassuring his friend. "I guess you're right, haha," Spinner was about to say when Gigantomachia was suddenly smashed into the ground. Midoriya stood above the beast, who was coughing up blood. The villains watched in fear as Gigantomachia writhed in pain. "Master, help me," Gigantomachia begged as he looked over at Shigaraki. Midoriya's cold eyes looked down at the beast, who was begging like a child, and raised his fist to land the finishing blow. "I'll use them all to put you down," Midoriya said as his arm began to distort and turn into a mesh of multiple quirks. "Yes, good, put this dog to rest." "I know you want to," All For One said, pressuring Midoriya. Midoriya looked down at Gigantomachia and set his eyes on the monster's head. "This is the end," Midoriya said. Midoriya, however, was suddenly pulled to the side by what seemed like a black lasso, causing him to miss his attack. The shockwave of the attack traveled up the road and created a large crater in the city center. It was as if a bomb landed on it. "Who?" Midoriya said in a dead voice. "Deku," Mirio said as he faced Midoriya. "You were going to kill him, he was down already," Mirio said. "He's a monster, you can't restrain something like this. You need to kill this thing before it kills you, that's how we win," Midoriya said in anger. "You don't even know what side you're fighting for anymore," Mirio retorted. "I know who I'm fighting for," Midoriya replied. Mirio kept up his defense and kept his eye on Midoriya. "I'm fighting for order. I'm fighting for the collective good of the people, and if heroes want to get in my way, they will be put down. Some criminals must not be allowed to live, don't you understand? What good will come of keeping this monster alive?" Midoriya said. "If that's how you think, then I have no choice but stop you, Midoriya," Mirio said, taking up a fighting stance. "Then I will take that quirk from you by force if I have to. I will break this cycle," Midoriya said as he walked toward Mirio. Mirio was prepared to fight, but to his surprise Midoriya had avoided him and went straight for Dabi. "This is the end, little brother. Die," Dabi shouted as he hugged Todoroki, ready to burn himself and his brother to ashes. Todoroki prepared himself to be scorched until he felt a wave of air in front of him. Midoriya used air cannon to push Dabi backward. "Midoriya," Todoroki said, "stay out of this," Dabi shouted as he launched an attack at Midoriya, who had gotten in the way of him and his fight with Todoroki. Midoriya ran into the flames head-on and grabbed Dabi's right wrist. "I'm in a bad mood right now, sorry," Midoriya said as he broke the villain's wrist with ease. "Ah!" Dabi shrieked in pain. "To ya," Endeavor said as he looked over at his son. "Give in," All For One said as he stood over Dabi's body. Midoriya closed his eyes tight and opened them back up only to see All For One had disappeared. "I'm seeing things," Midoriya said in a dazed whisper. Midoriya finally came to his senses and looked around, confused as to what was happening, but after looking at the faces of some of the heroes he knew what had happened. "I'm sorry," Midoriya whispered. The heroes were finally closing in on the villains and began to dispose of the remaining Namu, restraining the rest of the league swiftly. Gigantomachia Shigaraki was about to say when he was suddenly knocked out by Mirio. "That's enough," Mirio said. Gigantomachia was restrained after the full effect of the drug finally took over. Spinner, Skeptic, Shigaraki, Gigantomachia, and Dabi had all been arrested. The battle was a huge win for the heroes, but only Mirio and a few others knew there was something else to worry about now. Midoriya was nowhere to be found, and with All for One in his head, they began to fear the worst. In an old safe house, Midoriya opened the door and was met by dust and memories. It was the main safe house Stain and Midoriya had used in beginning. Stain's room was on the far right, revisiting old memories before you fade away. All for One said, cackling. Midoriya closed his eyes trying to ignore the voice and opened the door. Everything was still in its place: blades, clothes, and money. What's going to happen to me? Midoriya asked as he sat down on the couch in the living room. You're going to die. Not in the literal sense, your body will be fine, but your consciousness and mind will fade and it'll take over. All for One explained. Why me? Midoriya asked. You were just a backup. Shigaraki failed miserably, and although you're an incomplete and incompetent vessel, it will do. I must say, however, your mental fortitude is astounding. All for One said. No. Midoriya said, clenching his fist. No, huh? All for One said, amused. You're not taking over. I won't let you, even if it kills me. Midoriya said firmly. We will see, Midoriya, but when you do fail, I'm going to kill everyone you love with your body. All for One said in a sinister voice. Elsewhere, if you have seen this person, please contact the police or a nearby hero immediately. The news reporter said. A photo of Midoriya could be seen on screen on a vert news station in Japan. The photo on the screen only had 2 words. Chapter 35. Losing herself. 2 days later. Midoriya looked at himself in the mirror and inspected his hair and eye closely. What do I do? Midoriya said as he went to the living room and switched on the TV. The news was showing the destruction and interviewing the heroes. What are your thoughts on the boy who went rogue from you? The newswoman asked. I knew deep down he couldn't change. Camus said. I'm not surprised, not in the slightest. Who knows how many heroes he got killed, Mount Lady added angrily. Midoriya began to tap his feet quickly and only listened to their words. It seemed almost every hero was against Midoriya and his actions until he heard Aizawa's voice. No questions, please. Aizawa sighed. Please erase her head. One quote. Rumors were that you befriended him. The newswoman pleaded. You know what? These heroes should be thanking him for what he did. Yes, he did cross the line in some instances, but if it were not for him, Japan would have fallen. He is my friend and I trust in his judgment. That's my quote. Now leave me alone, Aizawa said as he pushed the camera aside and used his cane to walk to the car. Midoriya sighed once again and laid on the couch in a fetal position and fell to sleep. Back at UA, a group of heroes was discussing what to do with Midoriya. Only those who knew of All for One and One for All were present. We need to do something about Midoriya, Nezu said. He's not some dangerous criminal. Mirio added. Everyone at this table knows that All for One is manipulating his mind. Mirio. What I am saying is, how do we handle this without making a mess? Nezu explained. None of the previous holders ever had to deal with this. Midoriya's situation is unexplored territory. All Might said. All the other heroes, especially those who took part in the fight, are already on the lookout for Midoriya. Nezu added. The room went silent and had a moment to think of the outcomes. How are the League of Villains? Gran Torino asked. Imprisoned at Tartarus. The guards at the prison are starting to wonder about death penalties. Nemasa said. For once the heroes were stumped. All the dangerous villains were behind bars and the only threat now was a friend who, as far as they know, has gone off the deep end. Tartarus. Stain was sleeping when he heard the sound of the prisoners begin to rile up. So loud, Stain thought as he looked ahead and saw Shigaraki in handcuffs being escorted. Shigaraki and Stain's eyes met for a second before Shigaraki was taken away. Piece of shit. I knew Midoriya would take you down. Stain chuckled as he tried to scratch his itchy leg. Stain was restrained with a muzzle to stop him from trying to ingest blood from the guards. Let me out of here, you pieces of shit, Muscular shouted as he began to shake in his chair wildly. The turrets in his room pointed at him and got ready to fire. Fucking hell. Muscular mumbled angrily, admitting defeat. "It's getting crowded here," a guard said as he finished restraining Shigaraki in his chair. "I keep telling the higher-ups to let us put some of these pieces of garbage on the electric chair." The other guard said. The guards walked to the surveillance room and took a seat. "And what about that big thing Gigantomachia? Why don't we just kill him?" a guard asked. "He's technically human, so he still has rights." The guard scoffed. "Watch it, the last thing we need is people humanizing these scum. Leaks come from anywhere nowadays." The other guard in the corner replied, "Still. Have you seen the video of that kid they are looking for?" The guard asked. "Yeah, he's the most wanted man right now." "What about him?" he replied. "His speech on villains and quirks resonated with me a bit. He's right, Gigantomachia and all these villains are just disasters waiting to happen. It just stuck with me, that's all." The guard explained. "Don't let it resonate with you too much. I can see the headline now, Tartarus, guard agrees with villain." The other guard chuckled. It was quiet for the rest of the night in Tartarus. Midoriya stared at Tartarus blankly and a smile grew on his face. Soon Midoriya said in a raspy voice. Midoriya snapped back and didn't know what was going on. "Where am I?" Midoriya thought as he quickly looked around. Midoriya looked at Tartarus and knew what All for One was planning. "You piece of shit. You think he'll let you?" Midoriya said out loud. Midoriya knew deep down he would lose the fight of his mind eventually, but he had to think of something, anything to stop his plan. Elsewhere, the students and heroes were in the hospital recovering and some began to ask about their friend Midoriya. Aizawa, however, was already on top of finding his friend. "Where is he?" Aizawa groaned as he looked over at Present Mick. "I don't know, Aizawa, he's missing." Present Mick replied, "Something doesn't feel right about that with me. Midoriya isn't a guy to run from his problems. He would have returned and taken the punishment of disobeying orders." Aizawa replied. Present Mick looked over his shoulder and closed the door to Aizawa's room and pulled up a chair. "Some of the higher-ranked heroes are acting suspiciously when it comes to Midoriya. He's the most wanted in Japan right now and we don't even know for what. If it's just insubordination, I'm sure he would have returned as well, but this goes well beyond that." Present Mick whispered, "I may have an idea, but it still doesn't make sense," Aizawa said as he laid back in his bed. Aizawa explained how Midoriya could use All for One, but that it would destroy his mind to Present Mick. "That still doesn't explain why he left or why he is the most wanted right now. The sudden prison breakouts being done by civilians isn't helping us either," Present Mick said. "That's why I'll figure out what's going on and bring him back." Aizawa said. There was a pause and spoke. "If something happens to me, promise me you will take care of my class, only you, no one else." Aizawa said. Present Mick closed his eyes and sighed. "Sure, buddy." Present Mick said, "Oh, by the way, look what I got you." Present Mick said excitedly as he showed Aizawa a prosthetic for his right leg. "I almost forgot about that." Aizawa said as he looked down at his leg and chuckled. "Thank you." Aizawa said. "No problem, buddy. I'll see you later." Present Mick said as he closed the door behind him. "Where are you, Midoriya?" Aizawa thought as he closed his eyes. "At an unknown location." Midoriya was thinking of what to do. The clock was ticking and every moment he grew closer to death. He would cease to exist and All for One would take over his body and wreak havoc. "Move forward," the whispers said. "Just give yourself up already." All for One's voice echoed. Midoriya was starting to lose his mind hearing the voices in All for One in his head constantly. What do I do?" Midoriya tapped his right foot anxiously. "One more idea, come on," Midoriya said sternly at himself as he smacked his head with his hand. The voices got louder as Midoriya began hitting his head against the wall trying to think. Midoriya felt blood roll down from his head and stopped himself. He couldn't think of anything. Each route led to an unsatisfying outcome. Midoriya walked down the road and began to overhear the criticism heroes were receiving. The civilians also began to talk about the recent jailbreaks made by civilians who wanted to bust out the villains they considered victims. Tartarus was on high alert. Protests were being held each day for the release of some villains. Of course, a large majority wanted to keep villains behind bars for obvious reasons. A random man was walking down the sidewalk and bumped into Midoriya, who had his head down. "Hey, watch where you're going," the man said angrily. Midoriya stopped and turned slightly, only to ignore him and keep moving on. "Ignoring me, huh? I don't think you want to mess with me," the man said as his hand began to heat up and turn red. People around Midoriya and the man got ready to back off. Fights like these were now becoming commonplace with the belief of the Liberation Army's ideology. Many began to use their quirks irresponsibly. "I don't want trouble," Midoriya said, trying to mask his voice. "Well, too bad you got it now. And it's rude not to look someone in the eye when speaking to them," the man said as threw punch at Midoriya's face. Midoriya grabbed the man by the wrist and stopped him. "All for one, I told you to leave me alone," Midoriya whispered as he stole the man's quirk. "Let me go, bastard," the man said angrily as he broke free. Midoriya put his head back down and went on his way, looking back at the man who was panicking, not being able to use his quirk. Aizawa sat in his chair looking over some documents when he sighed and looked over at Midoriya's cracked U.A phone. Ring ring. Aizawa looked over to his phone and noticed he was receiving a call from an unknown number. "Hello?" Aizawa answered in a tired voice. There was a pause and Aizawa was about to hang up when he thought he heard a familiar voice call to him. "Midoriya?" Aizawa asked quickly. "No, Eraser, it's me, Hawks," the raspy voice said. "Hawks? You sound like shit." Aizawa said, "Listen, I know you're looking for Midoriya. I want to help." Hawks said with a cough. "All right, when do you want to meet up?" Aizawa asked. "I have a house just outside the city. I'll see you tomorrow." Hawks explained as he hung up. The media was still painting Endeavor in a bad light after his past had been exposed by Dabi. Citizens began to wonder what other secrets the heroes were hiding from them. They began to think, if the number one hero was capable of doing that to his family, imagine what all the other heroes could have done. As more and more villains from smaller prisons escaped, crime grew more rampant along with the increase of civilian quirk cases. Meanwhile, support for heroes declined each passing day. "Ungrateful, why are they so ungrateful?" Midoriya said as he stared at the T.V. "Because they are pawns, they need a leader to rule them with an iron fist. No better than cattle. Watch as one exposed hero here, a few dead over there, and a few destroyed buildings. That's all it took for them to lose years of trust in an instant." All for one said, laughing. Midoriya didn't want to pay any attention to his words, but he was right. Everyone trusted heroes for the longest time, but all it took was one major incident to change their minds. At Hawk's house, Aizawa knocked and waited for a response. Hawks opened the door and revealed his bandaged-up face. "I'd say your face is an improvement," Aizawa said. "How mean?" Hawks said as he closed the door behind Aizawa. "That prosthetic reminds me of a pirate," Hawks said, chuckling. Aizawa walked into the living room and noticed that there was two more heroes present. "Might," Aizawa said as he looked at the blonde boy and the skinny man. "These guys are the only ones who know about what's going on with Midoriya more than anybody," Hawks explained as he set down a teapot with some cups. There was a silent pause and Mirio spoke. "Midoriya is being controlled by All for One, but Midoriya can hold him back for now, although I'm not sure for how long," Mirio said. "How do you know this?" Aizawa asked. His wording and figure of speech matched that of All for One. "I've talked it over with All Might and he agrees that it's not impossible." Mirio added, "I'm going to tell you both something that shouldn't leave this room." All Might said. All Might explained to Hawks and Aizawa the true nature of One for All. "That's amazing," Hawks said, "and dangerous, but after hearing that I guess All for One can be similar in fashion." Aizawa said, "So what do you guys want to do?" Hawks asked. "I think Midoriya is going to break out All for One from Tartarus," All Might said. Everyone grew silent. A prison break of Tartarus could cause society to collapse entirely. Japan would fall to the villains. "Well, we can't let that happen," Hawks said with a raspy cough. Eri was able to return my original quirk, so I'm a lot more me these days, but it's not going to be enough. Mirio said. Eri. Aizawa whispered, we need more support, just us isn't going to be enough. Hawks said, too much info is being leaked right now, villains, threatening families to get information. Hawks said, everyone has family here, so that's almost impossible. Mirio added, I don't want to drag the students into this, but maybe Hawks was saying when he noticed the look on everyone's faces. The adults didn't want to drag the students into something this dangerous, especially something so sensitive. Got it, so just us, huh? Hawks sighed as he poured himself some tea. Aizawa looked over to the window and saw the bright city in the distance. I got one more person who might be able to help us. All Might, give me your detective friend's number. Aizawa said. All Might wrote down Namasa's number and handed it to Aizawa. Here it is. Namasa won't be much help though, he has family here. All Might said. I just need a favor, that's all. Aizawa said, let's meet up here tomorrow. I can locate Midoriya by tomorrow, but we need to be ready to defend Tartarus if he plans on breaking everyone out. Hawks said as he showed off his now healed wings. We will talk about your recon tomorrow, Hawks. All Might said. And one more thing. If it comes down to killing Midoriya, then so be it. Hawks said as he got up and walked the group out. I'll see you all tomorrow. Hawks said, back at UA. The school was in lockdown. Students couldn't leave the premises and were to remain indoors and continue classes. I heard we can't leave or anything. Kirishima said, it's for the best. Yaozu said, bullshit. We could be out there putting the escaped villains back in jail instead of sitting here like idiots. Bukagu said, I agree. Todoroki said. The rest of the class was fidgeting with their pencils and papers, trying to take their mind off the topic. Nezu walked into the classroom with Aizawa and walked to the front of the class. I could hear your shouting from the hallway, Bukagu. Nezu said, I'm sorry, Principal. Bukagu apologized. You're right though. With more and more top heroes retiring, it may be time for you all to take to the streets and help out. I don't mean now of course, but in time you and many others will arrest those who escaped and put them back in jail. So we can try to restore some order. Nezu explained, I know you're all down because of Midoriya, but if this operation goes well, hopefully, we can have him back. Aizawa said. Aizawa was the one who came up with this plan. You will each be assigned to a hero or agency and help in retrieving some villains who have escaped. Police and other heroes will be a part of this cleanup shortly, so be ready. Nezu said, if I can keep them away from Tartarus on that day, they can round up the small-time villains while I and a few others stop Midoriya. These small-time villains stand no chance against the students at U.A, and with the police with them along with pros it shouldn't be a problem. Aizawa thought. Class 1A was a bit hesitant until Mina spoke up and got their spirits up. Come on guys, this is what we wanted to do. We wanted to be heroes, so we need to keep our heads up high. Mina said cheerfully. She's right, Uraraka said. The once cold room felt a bit warmer as the others nodded in agreement and got pumped up. We can do this. Kaminari said, yay. The class shouted together. Nezu smiled and looked over at Aizawa and bowed goodbye to him and the students. Good luck everyone. Nezu said happily before leaving. Well, let's get training. Aizawa said. Later that day. Aizawa looked at the doorman, clenched his fist and was about to knock before stopping himself. No. Aizawa said to himself as he was about to walk away when the door swung open. I could see your shadow. Shinso said. It was nothing. Aizawa replied, I'm ready. You and Midoriya trained me for these things. I can handle it. Shinso said, what are you talking about? Aizawa replied, I can see it in your eyes. You have info on Midoriya. Shinso said, alright, keep your voice down. Aizawa said as he walked into Shinso's room, so, where is he? Shinso asked, don't know. But we know where he might go. After hours of thinking, I was thinking of asking you to help, but I can't ask a student to help. If any of you got killed, Aizawa said, you can't put those things on yourself. I trained to be a hero and I know what comes with the job. So let's cut the crap. Shinso said. Aizawa sighed and looked down at the ground, taking a moment to think. Don't tell anyone. Tomorrow meet with me in the gym, Aizawa said before leaving. The next day, Hawks opened the door and was surprised to see Shinso. Eraser, what happened to the whole no student thing? Hawks asked. He can handle it, don't worry, Aizawa replied. The group sat down and All Might was surprised to see Shinso but also a little relieved they had a bit more support. You are going to have to explain everything to him, All Might, Mirio said. Shinso was confused but he was ready to listen. All Might explained all for one and one for all to Shinso. That doesn't make the situation any simpler, but maybe with my brainwashing, we can stop him before he does anything drastic. About that, Hawks said. What is it, Hawks? Aizawa said. The whole breaking out Tartarus thing. Looks like it's going down the day after tomorrow. Hawks said. What? Mirio said. I heard him talking, but it wasn't Midoriya, it was that all for one guy. Talking about how in just 2 days he will issue in a new era. Hawks explained. Aizawa, your plan to have the students clean up the streets is when? All Might asked. In a week. Aizawa replied. We can knock 2 birds with 1 stone. While we stop Midoriya, the other students can take down the escaped villains farther away, stopping any possible reinforcements, and we keep the students away from Tartarus. Hawks explained. Alright, since it is my operation I'll tell them to move it up, Aizawa said. I'm going in with no rules. I'm killing any Namu or villains that stand in our way. Hawks said seriously. Shinso and I will provide support for you guys. Aizawa said. I can fight toe-to-toe with Midoriya and any other villains, but to take down Midoriya himself it's going to take everything we have. I still don't think we have enough to take him on and the others in the prison. Mirio said. I guess it's about time to tell you all. I got one more person to help us. Aizawa said. Who? All Might asked. Well, it took a few phone calls, but this guy can help turn the tide, Aizawa said as he placed a folder down on the table and opened it. Oh, yay. I like how you think, Hawks said smiling. You sure about this? Shin asked, a few hours after the first meeting. Let's see, here they are, Namasa said. Namasa did a few murmurs reading over a few things. So? Aizawa asked. Well, the sentence is over 2 years, but it's not too bad. There was an incident and the individual saved a guard and stayed in his cell even when he could have escaped. Namasa added, in a small prison. Fuck yeah, let's get out of here, a villain said as he ran out. Stop, a guard shouted. Really? A useless guard wants to stop me? The villain thought as he lunged forward with a makeshift knife. The guard tripped backward and fell on his back. Someone help, the guard shouted. Die. The villain screamed, but before his knife could penetrate the guard's chest he was launched backward. What the villain said. A white-haired and blue-eyed man stepped out of his cell and looked at the villain. You, the guard said, just a gentle push. No need to hurt this man. Gentle said, screw you. What, you think you're better than me now? The villain shouted as he lunged at Gentle. Gentle sighed and made an air bubble, launching the villain into a cell, knocking him out. Are you okay, sir? Gentle said, extending his hand. Yay, thank you, the guard said as he took his hand. I need him, Aizawa said. I talked to the higher-ups and they just gave me the green light. He's all yours. I'll send the files over now, Namasa said. Thank you again, Aizawa said. Gentle criminal, Mirio said. Guy did some time, but even before he only did petty crimes and never actually hurt anyone. I got him to agree and help us, but we had to get Manamieba out of the country first, Aizawa explained. I think with him on our side we can get this done. Hawks said. Let's go over the plan one more time, Shinso said. The group looked at the teen, surprised and relieved he was being extra cautious. We will be ready, Aizawa said. Midoriya looked down at Tartarus with a wicked smile on his face. Soon the new era will come and I will be the one standing on top, Midoriya said. Chapter 36. This is the end. One day before the attack, Tartarus, Midoriya looked down on the world from the clouds and sighed. All for one made sure to stop Midoriya from returning to U.A or contacting his mother, taking over his body and making him black out before he could even get close. Midoriya was only allowed to go where All for One willed it. Give up? All for One asked. Where is everyone? Midoriya asked. The voices? I shut them up for you. It was getting crowded in here. All for One said. Why me? Why couldn't you just leave me alone? Midoriya asked. I thought we went over this. There is no particular reason I chose you. Convenience was the only reason. The others were unstable, but you were more simple, unpredictable, sure but simple. I also love seeing people suffer. All for One explained. Well, I'm going to hold on to consciousness until I pass out, piece of shit. Midoriya replied angrily. Sure, enjoy your last few moments on this earth and then just enjoy the view. All for One said, laughing. 1 hour later at Midoriya's old school. The empty school was cold and dusty. It seems no one had been there for a while. Perhaps due to the villains outside. The only light source Midoriya had was from the windows and the sunlight pouring through. I was so weak. I could have just talked to my mother about it. I could have done so many other things, but I chose the coward's way out, and instead of facing my problems head-on, Midoriya choked up as he noticed his old homeroom. He walked into his old classroom and went over to his seat. The desk second to last on the third row. A small compartment which only he knew about hid some old notes. To-do list 1. A hero 2. Save people and help others 3. Buy mom a new house 4. Help the needy 5. Make the world a better place. Midoriya looked at the page and began to tear up. For the first time in a long time, he cried and his tears fell onto the ground and onto the piece of paper. I'm such a failure. I can't do anything right, I only make things worse for everybody. I want to see my mom and apologize for putting her through these things. They were right about me, I should have just died. Midoriya said, sobbing as he curled up into a ball in the ground and cried. Midoriya had suppressed his emotion for so long and now he was letting them all out. After all, he was still human. However, the only one hearing his cries now was the cold and dirty floor. I just want to disappear, Midoriya said as he sniffled. Midoriya took a nap on the cold floor, crying himself to sleep. 1 hour later, Midoriya got up and wiped his eyes and went outside, but not before putting the paper back in his desk. The rooftop where Midoriya was destroyed by All Might was his next stop. Midoriya sat on the roof and stared at the railings, imagining how things could have gone differently. I should have just Midoriya said as he punched the ground. Midoriya felt the blood run down his hand and felt his wound seal instantly. Anger filled Midoriya as he watched his hand regenerate. Stop, Midoriya said, annoyed. He punched the ground again, but harder, only to regenerate. Stop, Midoriya shouted as he punched the ground. A bone was sticking out of his hand, but it regenerated in a matter of seconds. Midoriya gave up and moved on from the roof. He wanted to talk to his mother. At least over the phone. Let me talk to my mother, Midoriya said. What good does it do for me? All for One said, just let me talk to my mother. Midoriya pleaded. I don't think so, Midoriya. All for One said, cackling. Midoriya threatened All for One. I'll just fly up and kill myself then. Midoriya said, we both know I'll stop you. All for One said, confidently. Midoriya walked to the safe house defeated and wondered what awaited him when All for One finally takes over. Why break your old body out? You're going to control me soon anyway. Midoriya said, defeated. After I break my old self out, I'll retrieve the doctor and perfect this body for myself. All for One said confidently, 2 heads better than 1, I guess. Midoriya said, fading. Goodbye, Midoriya. You fool. All for One said. Midoriya slowly began to drift and felt his consciousness begin to fade into darkness. 12 hours until the attack on Tartarus. Aizawa was meeting with his group. Along with him he had Shinso and Gentle, who were already geared up. It's a shame to hear the young boy is in such a state, but we must act fast if we wish to stop this. All for One individual, Gentle said. Agreed. As far as we know, he could already be in control. Shinso added. Aizawa was in the passenger seat while Gentle drove them to the meetup. Hawks was waiting for Aizawa and his group so he could start the last meeting. Here's how the plan should shake out. Midoriya will break into Tartarus from the bridge and he will most likely have Namu with him to aid his assault. All the eggs are in this basket for all for one. Hawks explained. I thought we captured all the Namu. Shin asked. That's what we thought also, but the sighting of these things has popped up and they all seemed to be moving in the direction of the prison. So it's safe to assume that's his army rallying. Hawks said, after Midoriya inevitably breaks into the prison. We can assume he will jam communication and take over the prison in under a few minutes. Our job however is to sneak in during the commotion, and find Midoriya, corner him and open up a window for Mirio to take him out without much trouble. Hawks explained, remember there are very high-level villains here so be wary of these guys. I can disable them for you Hawks but you need to be quick in taking them out. Aizawa said. Don't worry. I won't hesitate. Hawks said in his raspy voice, I have a question. Gentle said as he took a sip of his tea and raised his hand. Yes, All Might said, what of Endeavor and the others? Gentle asked. The others will be in the city getting all those villains who escaped and Endeavor is in hot waters right now so his appearance could spark something else entirely. All Might replied, I see. What of my part then? What shall I do? Gentle asked. You're going to stick with Shinso and Aizawa. With Aizawa's bum leg and Shinso's low battle power, we need you to keep villains off their back. Supporting Mirio and me when you get the chance will also be your job. Hawks explained. Gentle nodded and took a sip of tea. Shinso, you are our ace. Assuming All for One doesn't know you, we hope you can catch him off guard with your quirk. Hawks said as he looked at the teen. I understand. Shinso replied, okay, everyone rest up, we leave in a few hours. Aizawa said. The group split up in the house and found a spot to rest and sleep. We can do this. We can do this. Mirio said to himself in the mirror. Shinso laid in a bed and rested up, clearing his mind. Gentle made himself another tea and thought of La Brava while he took a sip. Hawks looked at a picture of his mom on his phone and sighed. Aizawa rested his eyes and All Might prayed for the success of this mission. At Tartarus 5 p.m. Midoriya looked down at Tartarus with Namu by his side. Finally, Midoriya said in a cold voice, All for One in the lowest section of Tartarus was smiling knowing he would escape soon. Aizawa and his team watched Midoriya from a distance and watched as Namu crossed the one-way bridge into Tartarus. Wait for the sirens and then he'll fly us in. Hawks said. Shinso put on his mask and got his binding cloth ready. All Might was sitting back at the home base and tapping his feet nervously. Midoriya walked down the large bridge and ordered Namu to start attacking. Alarms began to ring, but before Inso's signal could be sent out, the towers were taken out by Namu. Now to get my body back, Midoriya said as he looked ahead at the prison. The guards watched in horror as Midoriya took out the defense systems with ease. Brother, Jijis said as he dragged his brother body away from the fight. Hawks was flying the group nearby and got ready to sneak in with Midoriya. He's already broken through the prison defenses. If he releases the villains down below, we won't have a chance. Aizawa said, just follow the plan. Remember what we are here to do. Hawks said. The heroes all moved in and avoided killing or fighting any Namu as to not alert Midoriya. The robot guards are keeping Namu busy, let's use this to sneak by. Shinso said, as Aizawa said that, Midoriya used a quirk to disable all the power in the facility. The villains will be escaping soon with this power outage. Gentle said, I'm going to phase down one level until meet you guys there. Mirio said as he fell into the ground, on me. Hawks said as he narrowed his eyes and ran into the prison. The upper levels were small fry to the heroes. They didn't stand a chance against Hawks and his team. Let's move. Hawks said as he flew down the stairway. Gunshots could be heard down below as Mirio and the guards fended off the more dangerous villains. Finally we're free. A villain shouted as he launched himself toward the guards using his hardening quirk. Our bullets won't penetrate, He's coming right for us. The guard shouted, "Sit down." Mirio said as he punched the villain in the face using one for all. The villain's face cracked like a rock and he was sent flying back into the group of villains down the hall. "We are authorized to use lethal force. Stand down." A guard warned the escaped villains, "Go to hell." A villain shouted back, "Fire." The guard shouted. The bullets rained down on the villains. Only those with a defense-type quirk lived through the barrage of bullets. Blood could be seen all over the walls and floor. "What are you guys doing here?" a guard asked the heroes. "No time to explain, just hold a position and stay away from the bottom level." Hawks ordered. The guard didn't have time to question Hawks or his superior. "The guy I'm assuming you're looking for is downstairs." The guard said, "Let's move." Hawks said. Mirio looked over at the group and was happy to see no one was hurt yet. Midoriya looked around the floor and saw a familiar face. "Mustard," Midoriya said as he disintegrated the door. Mustard walked into the hallway and looked at Midoriya. "It's you." Mustard said. "Yes." Midoriya said. Mustard felt a chill and ran in the other direction. "No, that's not the same guy from before. That thing is something else," Mustard thought as he made his way to the surface. Hawks made his way down the stairs and ran into Mustard. "You're part of the League of Villains," Mirio said as he looked at the teen. "You can't stop me." "Not with my quirk," Mustard said as he put his hand over his mouth and got ready to activate his quirk. Mustard tried to activate his quirk but nothing happened. "I remember you, from the forest," Aizawa said to Eraserhead. Mustard grumbled. "Sleep for now," Mirio said as he knocked out Mustard with ease. The group moved on and took out the escaped villains. The fighting taking place on the surface was still raging on. Midoriya looked around and could only see darkness. He was alone in this dream world. "Where is everyone?" Midoriya thought as he kept walking. "I'm not sure myself," the skinny man said. "It's over, you know. I can't stop Paul, for one," Midoriya said. "My brother was horrifyingly calculated, even when we were younger," the man said. Midoriya continued walking alongside the skinny man. "What do I do?" "Watch as he destroys everything," Midoriya said, defeated. The skinny man sighed and looked over at Midoriya. "You can't beat him, and if he succeeds in breaking out the prisoners on the final level, no one will be able to stop him," the skinny man explained. Midoriya thought about his friends at Udate and his mother. "So that's it," Midoriya said as he sat down. The skinny man looked forward and looked down at Midoriya. "I never said it was impossible to stop him," the skinny man added. Midoriya's ears perked up and he looked up at the man. "You're not going to like the plan, however," the skinny man said. Shinso used his binding to drag his enemy before punching him in the jaw, knocking him out. "Now what?" Shinso said, out of breath. Piles of villains were all over the ground. Hawks walked over to the others carefully when he sensed a villain who was pretending to be knocked out jump at him with a sharp object. "Hawks!" Shinso shouted. Hawk's feathers cut the man's hand off and quickly stabbed the villain in the back. Blood landed on Hawk's glasses as he pulled the feather blade out. "That was messy," Hawks said as he wiped the blood off his glasses. "I just hope the surface isn't overrun yet." Mirio added, "Let's us keep moving, gentlemen." Gentle said. Aizawa nodded in agreement and the group went further down Tartarus. There they would meet with one of the many people they had fought in the past. Midoriya went through the level releasing villains and quickly made his way deeper. "Meet," Moonfish said. Midoriya had reached the end of the 9th floor and heard a familiar voice. "Moonfish, you will be needed," Midoriya said as he set the insane man free. All for One was feeling cocky. His plan was going great so far. No one was strong enough to stop him and he was starting to get close to his body. "Soon it will all be mine," All for One thought as he walked down the stairs to the 9th level. Dabi was dreaming of his past. The things he had done and what led him to be strapped to a bed with restraints. The resentment he held towards his younger brother and his father burned inside him. "Kill them. I would have killed them if it wasn't for," Dabi thought as he finally woke up to the Sounds of his door being broken into. Midoriya looked down at the restrained villains and set him free. Dabi's eyes widened and he lunged at Midoriya in anger. "You!" Dabi growled as he put his hands around Midoriya's neck. "I'm going to kill you," Dabi said as he ignited his flames and burned Midoriya's neck. Dabi was sure he killed Midoriya, but when the smoke settled he was surprised to see Midoriya staring back at him as a man looks at an insect. "You poor fool. So obsessed with daddy you hinder your potential," Midoriya said. Dabi felt immense pressure when he looked at Midoriya, his legs almost giving out. Midoriya was beyond him, he was nothing but an insect in his eyes. Dabi's instincts knew immediately he had to get out of that room or yield before he was killed. "Fucking monster," Dabi thought as he tried to push Midoriya to the side. "Not so fast," Midoriya said as he stopped Dabi. Dabi closed his eyes and felt a nervous sweat roll down. "What do you want?" Dabi asked. "I need some subordinates if I'm going to overthrow the heroes," Midoriya said. "I have my own goals at this time." Dabi said. Midoriya, all for one, didn't like being denied by some below him. "Is that so?" Midoriya said as he reached out for Dabi with his right hand. Dabi instinctively backed up and ran out the door, avoiding Midoriya entirely. "I have to get out of here, away from that," Dabi thought as he ran up the stairs and was met by Hawks and the group. "Dabi," Hawks said. Dabi smiled at Hawks, Burns and the group he was with. "So you pulled together a team to try and stop Midoriya?" Dabi said. "What we do is none of your business, now get back in your cell immediately." Mirio said. "Make me," Dabi said, igniting his flames. Dabi tried to launch his attack but nothing appeared. A feather pierced his right shoulder, making the villain flinch in pain. What the?" Dabi shouted. Hawks looked at Dabi, his usual happy-go-lucky expression switched to that of a trained killer. More feathers cut Dabi up until he was no longer able to stand on his 2 feet. "We cannot afford to do things by the book anymore," Hawks said. "Don't get in our way." Aizawa said. Dabi fell on one knee as he began to bleed even more. "You won't be able to stop him, killing him is the only way now," Dabi said, chuckling. "Go to sleep," Mirio said as he punched Dabi in the jaw, knocking him out. The sounds of screaming could be heard deeper into Tartarus. The final floor was awaiting the heroes. Midoriya and Japan's most dangerous criminals stood in the way of peace. Shinso looked into the dark hallway. He was afraid, but as he looked to the left and his right, the determined faces of his team gave him confidence. "This is it," Hawks said. "You know the plan, contain Midoriya. If we have no other choice, Mirio, you will have to kill him." Aizawa said. Gentle criminal sighed and closed his eyes, but he understood. The B10 floor was massive, it was like a maze, but Midoriya knew where All for One's body was. "Almost there," Midoriya said as he turned corners and inched closer. Aizawa and the rest avoided conflict on the B10 floor to conserve energy and to try getting the drop on Midoriya. "Two coming up now, get in the cell," Hawks said as he motioned the group over. "What was your plan?" the skinny man asked. Midoriya just sighed and looked up at him. "It wasn't my plan, the voices kept pestering me about taking one for all. They said if I wanted to live I had to take the quirk and take the original All for One," Midoriya said. "I don't understand," the man replied. "They said if I took the quirks and manifested them, I could crush them together and destroy both of them for good," Midoriya said. The skinny man stopped and took a moment to think. "It is possible, but why hold on to this information from your friends?" the man asked. "Nothing has been the same since the voices, they just don't let me do what I want, and with All for One inching closer I couldn't realize then, but I was already a puppet," Midoriya explained. "Well, your friends are here. They can stop you and put an end to this," the man said. Midoriya's ears perked up and looked at the man. "Mirio and some of your friends are here to stop you," the skinny man said as he showed Midoriya an image of everyone involved. "Tell them to leave, they are going to get themselves killed," Midoriya said. "Even if I did they wouldn't listen," You're just going to have to trust them. The skinny man said. Midoriya paced around and kept trying to think of a plan or anything to help. Midoriya, you can't do anything from here. The skinny man said. Shut up, you don't think I know that? Midoriya shouted. Come on, something, anything. Midoriya said. Midoriya, as I was saying, you may not be able to do anything from here, but what about your friends? The skinny man said. Shinso. Midoriya said. Bingo. The skinny man said. Like back then he snapped me out of my trance during training. If he could do that, even if it's for a couple of seconds, I can fix this. Midoriya said. I know what I have to do. Midoriya said, looking at the skinny man. Shinso looked over at Hawks for the signal to move. B10th floor is full of Japan's worst, so stay on your toes. Aizawa said. Stain was on his bed when he heard a loud bang come from across the hall. Is that fucker making a ruckus again? Stain said, annoyed. Silverfish and Muscular always caused problems. Stain wondered how unstable people like them could still be allowed to live. Of course, he was no exception, and he knew that. Just another day. Stain sighed as he closed his eyes. There was a knock at his cell and he looked over to see Midoriya. The hell? Stain said. The door flew open and Midoriya walked in. The fuck? Kid, what are you doing? Stain asked. Hero killer Stain in the flesh. Midoriya said. Stain knew something was off by that line alone. Who the hell are you? Stain asked, standing his ground. I'm not going to hide anything. I am all for one. What I'm going to ask is very simple. Pledge allegiance to me. You can reshape society as you see fit under my rule. Midoriya said. Stain was disturbed seeing someone else using his apprentice's body as a puppet. Now kneel. Midoriya said. Sure. Stain said as he kneeled before Midoriya. Good. Midoriya said as he turned to leave the cell. Stain picked up a shard of glass and got up slowly. I'll free you, kid. Stain thought as he launched himself toward Midoriya and aimed for his neck. Not fast enough, hero killer. Midoriya said as he blasted Stain through a wall, knocking him out. A small cut on Midoriya's cheek healed as he looked down at Stain's unconscious body. Unfortunate. Midoriya said as he moved on. Mirio looked over and noticed a woman unlocking all the cells of the inmates with her quirk. We have to stop that one. She's releasing all the inmates. Mirio said. I see her, but she's surrounded by many others. Shinso said. Gentle looked over and glanced over at Shinso. I have an idea. Gentle announced. Yo, someone get me out of here. A villain shouted from behind a cell. I got you, don't worry. The woman replied. In an instant, her eyes went blank and she stood, motionless in the doorway. Walk into the cell calmly. Shinso said. The woman walked in and stared blankly into space. Knock her out. Aizawa said. Mirio quickly knocked her out quietly and used the blankets from the room to tie her up. She won't wake up from that anytime soon. Mirio said. Good job, you two. Hawks said, praising Gentle and Shinso. Shinso looked over at Gentle and did a short nod. Midoriya watched as villains escaped their cells and ran toward the exit. Good, good. Midoriya said as he walked toward All for One. Midoriya was enjoying his walk when he was stopped by an old acquaintance. It seems there were only a handful of villains left on the bottom floor. If it isn't the runt. Muscular said, scoffing. Muscular, it has been a while, hasn't it? Midoriya said. Muscular had been harboring a grudge for Midoriya ever since he was caught. I've been thinking every day how I was going to kill you if I ever got out. Now that you're in front of me here, I think he'll just tear you limb from limb. Muscular said, oozing bloodlust. Midoriya rolled his eyes and just walked past him, ignoring his threats. Muscular's eye twitched slightly at that response and turned to punch Midoriya. Die! Muscular shouted as he launched an attack at Midoriya. Midoriya turned around and launched Muscular back before he could land his punch. Do you want us all to drown down here? Midoriya asked calmly. Muscular got up quickly and stepped up to Midoriya. I'm done playing these games. Let me kill you now. Muscular said as he took another step forward. Muscular, are you so eager to die? Midoriya said as he picked up a piece of metal and disintegrated it. Muscular took a step back and realized that it was Shigaraki's quirk. Disintegration was something even he couldn't mess with. Bastard! Muscular snarled as he walked away. Muscular cursed himself for backing off, but he had a new plan: kill Midoriya as he walked out of the prison with the help of some other villains. If I can convince the inmates to turn on that brat, I can kill him. It's perfect, Muscular said with a twisted smile. For now I want to feel the guard's flesh being crushed by my hands. Muscular continued. Hey! A voice called out. Eh? Muscular replied, confused as he turned to look for the source of the voice. Turn around behind you. The voice said. Muscular did a quick backhand but was surprised to find no one there. Get back in your cell now. Hawk said, appearing from the shadows. Just what I wanted to see, a hero. I'm going to have fun ripping you apart. Muscular said with a smile. Muscular tried to activate his quirk, but to his surprise, nothing happened. Huh? What's going on? Muscular said, desperately trying to activate his quirk. Muscular began to remember how he felt the day he lost to Midoriya, powerless without his quirk. Fuck you! Muscular shouted as he picked up a metal bar. Hawks used his feathers to stab Muscular all over his body. No, and Muscular was about to scream before he was stabbed in the heart by Hawks. SHH. Hawks said as he pulled out his feather sword from the villain's body. Aizawa appeared from out of the shadows and put on some eye drops. Good riddance. Aizawa said as he stepped over Muscular's lifeless body. Shinso stared at the dead body for a moment before being snapped back into reality by Gentle. Boy, are you okay? Gentle asked. Yeah, I just. Shinso replied, sometimes it's necessary, Shinso. I will try to carry this burden if I can, but remember, you must be prepared to do what is necessary if the safety of others is at risk. Hawks explained. Don't worry, Shinso, we can handle it. You are too young to have blood on your hands already. Mirio said, come on, let's move. Aizawa said, patting the teen's back. Midoriya looked down the hall and inched closer to the maximum security door holding All for One's original body. Finally. Midoriya said as he walked toward the door. Stop, Midoriya. Aizawa said. Midoriya activated his quirk, knocking out the lights on the final floor. The emergency lights came on and a red hue now illuminated the final floor. Shinso, Mirio, Aizawa, Hawks, and Gentle stood behind Aizawa ready to fight. I knew someone would show, but this is the best you can do. Midoriya said, laughing at the group. You're far too late to stop me now. This boy's body belongs to me now, he is already gone. Midoriya said. Midoriya dashed toward the door, but before he could reach it he fell to the ground. What is? Midoriya said. A cold presence could be felt behind the heroes. Not so fast, Stain said as he held a shard of glass with blood on it. Even if you kill me now, my body on the other side has awoken. Midoriya said. All for One's presence could be felt on the other side of the door. Midoriya smiled back at the heroes. The dark room peered into the heroes, a feeling of dread come over them. It feels good to stretch my legs. All for One said as he stepped out. What's the plan now? Gentle asked. There is no more plan. It's over. All for One and Midoriya said in unison. Midoriya was finally able to stand up and stood next to All for One. Oh blood. Stain said under his breath. Even if you're out, with my quirk you're just a shriveled old man and he's not able to take us all on by himself no matter how talented. Aizawa said, you have to blink eventually, and when you do, these walls will be painted with your blood. All for One and Midoriya said, I'm going in. Mirio shouted as he attacked All for One. Midoriya's mine. Hawks said as he chased after Midoriya. All for One and Midoriya dashed in separate directions to avoid having their quirks erased at the same time by Aizawa. Aizawa had lost his left eye on the raid against the League, so he was only able to keep his eyes on one person. Midoriya. Aizawa said as he chased after Hawks and Midoriya. I heard you killed twice, Hawks. Midoriya said as he fired off some quirks at Hawks. I did what was necessary. Who am I even talking to, anymore? Hawks asked as he launched some feathers at Midoriya. Who knows? Midoriya said, laughing as he dodged. Midoriya jumped to the left, but to his surprise, he was launched back by an invisible force. Gently rebound. What? Midoriya said. Not so fast, my old acquaintance. Gentle said. This man. That means the one with the brainwashed quirk should be near my original body. Midoriya thought. Stop, Midoriya, it's over. Aizawa said as he caught up to the rest. Hawks attacked Midoriya with his feathers, but to his surprise, he dodged them without using a single quirk. Yes, I quite like this body, so much muscle memory already saved. It was almost second nature. Midoriya said as he clenched his fist. Okay, bind him, he can't go anywhere while I'm erasing his quirk. Aizawa said. Gently sandwich. Gentle sandwiched Midoriya with multiple layers and kept him pinned for. Fuck, I need to blink. Aizawa said, straining his eye. We have to kill him now. Hawks said. No. Aizawa shouted back. Gentle looked over at the two heroes and back at Midoriya, who had a wicked smile on his face. Oh, this is great. Midoriya said. Has gone. He's already dead. Hawks said as he made a blade with his feather and got ready to cut into Midoriya's neck. Shit. Aizawa said, defeated. Not so fast. All for one said as he dashed past and slammed Gentle to the side and grabbed Midoriya. Shit. Hawks said as he swung at Midoriya but was only able to cut his shoulder. He just started running over here out of nowhere. Mirio said, catching his breath. Mirio's hero costume was already damaged, showing cuts on his arms. He has the advantage here. I can't use my full power and he has access to thousands of quirks. Mirio explained. What should we do now? Gentle asked. Wait, where is Shinso? Aizawa asked, looking around. He ran in another direction and said he had a plan. Try the radio. Mirio explained. Fuck. Shinso, do you read me? Aizawa asked. The others listened in, but could only hear static on the other end. I can't hear you either. He probably knocked the comms. Hawks said, we can only place our trust in the boy for now. If he was trained by you and Midoriya, he should be fine. Gentle added. Gentle pulled out a sharp metal from his arm and tied it up with some cloth. That looks bad. Can you still fight? Mirio asked. As long as I can touch it, it'll be fine, but I won't last another hit like that. Gentle said. Let's try fighting together this time. Hawks said. The group moved quietly looking for Midoriya and All for One when they were suddenly ambushed by a large blast of wind. I'm done playing with my food. It's time to end this. All for One and Midoriya said in unison. Are you prepared to do this, Midoriya? The skinny man asked. Do I have another choice? I'll do what is necessary for the safety of my mother, my friends, and everyone else. Midoriya replied. You may have been labeled villain, but you're a hero to me. The skinny man said. Some other shadows appeared behind him, although they were extremely transparent. The previous holders of One for All are cheering you on. The skinny man added. Midoriya looked down at his hands and closed them. You have been a pain since I've met you. All for One said as he launched black tendrils toward Aizawa, using dead prisoner's body to block Aizawa's line of sight. Mirio stood in All for One's way and stopped him from attacking Aizawa by slamming into him. Where is Midoriya? Hawks said as he began to look around. Midoriya appeared from the shadows and used air cannon to launch Hawks to the side and aimed at Aizawa. Stop him, Gentle. Hawks shouted. Now die. Midoriya said as he prepared to disintegrate Aizawa. Midoriya had reached out with his hand to touch Aizawa back, but he was launched upward by Gentle. Damn, I can't keep up anymore. Gentle said in between labored breathing. This best. Midoriya said as he used air cannon and aimed it at Aizawa's back. Aizawa said as he turned around. Hawks tried to break Aizawa's fall, but his feathers were not fast enough to reach him. Aizawa slammed against the metal wall and fell to the ground, not making another sound. Good enough. All for One said, satisfied. My vision is starting to get blurry, Hawks. Gentle said as he held his arm. Gentle was going to black out soon, and then it would only be Mirio, Hawks, and Shinso if he was still alive. It's over. I've won. After all this time I can finally achieve my goal. All for one, and Midoriya said as they approached Hawks and Mirio. Not if I'm here. One for all, said Midoriya, and One for All's ears perked up at the sound of that voice. A large smile grew on All for One's face. How fitting that the symbol of peace will die to my hands. I'll spare you the sight of seeing everything you fought for being destroyed. Midoriya and All for One said. Hawks and Mirio looked around waiting to see One for All appear, but were met by silence. Wait. All for One and Midoriya's eyes widened at the realization. Stop moving. Shinso ordered. All for One felt his heart sink for a moment, but much to his surprise he wasn't being controlled. Shinso appeared from the darkness and revealed himself. Oh, you poor child, to think you would die this young. All for One said, please just release me, Shinso said as he looked over at Midoriya. Midoriya felt nauseated and confused. It was almost surreal being back in control of his body. He looked to his left and saw All for One getting his last words and before killing the heroes. Shinso looked at Midoriya and hoped his brainwash would give Midoriya control again. It was a swift motion as Midoriya aimed his hand toward All for One's neck. What? All for One said as he turned to attack Midoriya. Midoriya dodged and placed his hand on the old man's neck. All for One began to laugh and raised his hands in the air. You fool, even if you kill me in a few moments I will just take your body over again. So do it. All for One said, laughing. Do it, Midoriya, kill him. Hawks said. Mirio knew this was for the best and he couldn't ask Midoriya to stop, not with everything that was at stake. Do what you think is best. Gentle groaned. Midoriya tightened his grip around the old man and did the unthinkable. All for One, what are you doing? You bastard, you're going to kill us both. All for One shouted. I know, Midoriya said as he began to steal all the quirks All for One had. If Aizawa isn't dead, tell him and everyone I'm sorry. Make sure that my friends Anu.A are safe and tell my mom I'm so sorry but that I died doing what I thought was right. Midoriya said, I shall not die at the hands of a child. Let me go, you fucking piece of shit. All for One shouted, angrily. All for One had already lost more than half of his quirks at this point and Midoriya was feeling his own body begin to break down. The voices told me to take One for All from its user, but I know now. It was you this whole time, making plans and using the voices as cover. It was smart, but unfortunately for you, it didn't work. Midoriya said, you fucker. All for One said as he clawed at Midoriya's face with his nails. Midoriya ignored the pain and kept stealing all the quirks. Soon I'll take the quirk you can't live without and you will shrivel up and die like the piece of trash you are. Midoriya said with a smile. All for One began to feel weak in the knees as he felt the quirk life force being stolen. There it is. Midoriya said as he felt all of the power in the old man's suddenly body begin to leave. You piece of shit. All for One managed to choke out before collapsing to the floor. All for One began to twitch and kick on the floor as his body seemingly aged by 100 years in an instant. Midoriya fell to the floor and laid there motionless right next to All for One. Hawks, check on him, I got Aizawa. Shinso said. Mirio and Hawks snapped out of their trance and moved to help. Hawks placed his ear next to Midoriya's mouth and noticed he wasn't breathing. Fuck, come on kid. Hawks said as he tried CPR. Midoriya could faintly hear a voice as he looked down the bright tunnel. It was a preview of all his moments, from his early years to now. It felt like hours, yet at the same time, it only took a second to relive it all. Half a year later, Aizawa used his cane to prop himself up and limped over to Recovery Girl. How is he today? Aizawa asked. Recovery Girl knew Midoriya's state wouldn't get better magically overnight, but she still told him the truth as always. Him taking on all those quirks destroyed his mind. In short, he's brain dead. These machines are the only thing keeping him alive right now, sweetie. That procedure is the only hope he has, but if the higher-ups deny it, then this is the best we can do for him. Recovery Girl said. Aizawa sighed. Everyone else has come and gone already, Aizawa. Go home and get some rest. Recovery Girl said. It's only been a few months since the incident at Tartarus. Brave heroes laid down their lives to protect us even when we had our backs turned to them. Let us remember those who have passed and appreciate those we have now." The newswoman on the television said. Hawks let out a raspy cough and turned off the television and made himself some tea. It was starting to rain when he heard a knock at his door. "I'm coming," Hawks said as he let out another cough. Hawks opened the door and were happy to see his guests had arrived. "Maybe come in?" All Might asked. Yay. Hawks said. Shinso, Gentle, Mirio, All Might, and Aizawa walked inside the large house. "Please sit," Hawks said. "Well, any progress?" Hawks asked, clearing his throat. "No, the board doesn't trust Midoriya. They are afraid he will go rogue again. They're saying keeping him on life support is mercy already," Mirio said. Aizawa rolled his eyes annoyed and gripped his cane. "I've used up all of my influence trying to get Midoriya cured, but still, nothing," All Might said. "How have you been, Gentle?" Shin asked. "My arm hurts a bit when I grip something too hard, but otherwise fine. La Brava takes good care of me and my arm," Gentle replied. The room grew silent and only the sound of the rain hitting the roof could be heard. "They don't care about him. He's officially declared dead anyway. Only a few people know he's still alive, but we have to keep trying," Aizawa said. "How is his mother doing?" Hawks asked. "Devastated, but she has hope we can convince the board to go through with the operation," Aizawa replied. "Will the operation even work?" Shin asked. "Eri can reverse anything. She's even letting her horn grow so she can have enough power to reverse him that far back," Aizawa explained. "Let's go talk to them together. We will convince them ourselves or we threaten to expose everything," Hawks said, taking a sip of his tea. Everyone expected Mirio to say something against the suggestion, but to everyone's surprise, he was on board. "That day Midoriya took a burden that should have been mine. He's done so much for everyone, it's about time we repay him," Mirio said. The next day. "Now or never," Mirio said as he did last minute adjustments to his suit. Mirio, Hawks, Aizawa, and All Might walked into the conference room and faced the board. Nezu, Endeavor, Mirko, Ryuku, Kami, and Best Genius were the new board instated after the attack on Tartarus. "You all know why we are here," Mirio said. "The boy has paid his dues. He's allowed to enjoy his life. His mother is waiting for him to come home," All Might said. Endeavor thought of his son Dabi and sighed. "Not only did you infiltrate Tartarus but took a student with you as well. Shinso Hitoshi is not a registered hero, as well as Tabata Danjiro. You're lucky Shinso's parents dropped the charges." Endeavor said. "The boy got what was coming for him. He did bad things and paid for them. Things could have gone more according to plan if he didn't show up that day. Midnight could still be alive," Mount Lady said. "It's impossible to control every aspect of life. Nimri knew this better than anyone. Stop trying to pin every mistake and shortcoming of us the heroes on a young boy," Aizawa added. "You all now know the true nature of One for All. Midoriya had no control over his actions. You need to understand, with All for One constantly in his head, feeding him ideas he was bound to break. He was manipulated and exploited, yet still you refuse to do anything to thank the boy who quite literally saved this country," Mirio explained. Rinka felt some guilt come over her as she remembered some students from Class 1A asking her about Midoriya. "I don't care what you lot say. My answer is still no, and even if I agreed he should undergo the procedure, what are the chances he won't be under All for One's control still?" Mirko said. "We have extensively looked into his past and talked with his mentor Stain. He gave us a date and time before he entered the league. If we can rewind him before that time he should be fine," Aizawa explained. "And if he isn't?" Best Genius asked. "Then we will end his suffering ourselves," Hawks said in a cold voice. The room grew cold at that comment. Ever since Hawks was let go by HPSC, he no longer kept anything to himself. "If this doesn't work, the only way to end this kid's suffering is to kill him. We can't imprison him because All for One would just find a way to break out," Hawks said. "Give us your answer," Mirio said. There were a few murmurs amongst them and they finally decided to take a vote. Those not in favor raise your hands. Endeavor Mirko, Kami, and Mount Lady raised their hands. Much to everyone's surprise, Endeavor didn't raise his hand. I could not be there for Tuya when he needed me, but this boy deserves to be home. Endeavor said, I can't bear to see my students like this anymore. They want to see their friend again. Nezu added, we do owe him a great deal for taking out that menace, so I mean. Riku said, he will go into witness protection and move from Japan under a new identity, however. As far as the public is concerned, he is dead. Best Jeanist said, thank you so much. All Might said, bowing, thank you. Aizawa said, also bowing, everyone thank you, I know you're all looking out for everyone. Mirio said, bowing, it would be weird if I didn't bow, huh? Thank you. Hawks said, bowing. Outside the group had a small chat. So in one day, huh? Hawks said, I guess they want to rip it off quickly like a band-aid. Mirio said, at least we cleared the hardest hurdle, now we wait. All Might said, listen Mirio, All Might and I are heading to U.A. Want to come and say hi to the students? Aizawa asked Hawks. No, I need to rest for tomorrow, Hawks said, waving goodbye. Back at UA- sat in her room staring at her ceiling, and she turned and hugged her pillow until there was a knock at her door. Hey, Mina, Aizawa is calling for us. Yoraraka said, thank you, I'll be down in a bit. Mina replied. The students all gathered and wondered what was going on. Bukigu let out a sigh and looked at his friend Kirishima, being dumb as usual, and smiled. What this about, sir? Mina asked. I'm not sure myself, but it might be good since I saw Aizawa with a smile on his face. Asui said with a smile. Aizawa walked in with Mirio and All Might and spoke to the students. I have good news for you all, however it must never leave this room. Aizawa said. The students all quietly nodded and focused their attention on Aizawa. We got the go-ahead on Midoriya's operation, everyone. Mirio said. If everything goes, Midoriya will be back on his feet in a few days. All Might added. The students felt their hearts drop at that amazing news. Mina put her hand over her mouth and almost fell to her knees. Did you hear that, Mina? Yoraraka asked with tears in her eyes. Mina nodded with tears in her eyes and hugged Yoraraka. I need to give that fucker a piece of my mind when he wakes up. Bukigu said with a smile. Don't get too excited yet. There is a chance that All for One could still be in control, and if that is the case, then we have to. Aizawa explained before stopping himself. Just pray this works, everyone. Go to bed. Aizawa said. The students grew silent and went to their rooms thinking about Aizawa's words. Where is Eri? Aizawa asked. She's hanging out with Nejire. Mirio said, okay, let's go talk with her. Aizawa said, everyone, I'm going to get in contact with Midoriya's mother and explain the situation. All Might said, good night, All Might. Aizawa said before leaving. Eri was being read a bedtime story when Aizawa and Mirio entered the room. Eri, do you still want to help Midoriya? Mirio asked. You guys convinced the board? Nejire asked Aizawa. Aizawa nodded and Nejire let out a big smile and sigh of relief. That's good to hear. Nejire said, I want to help him, he saved me, and now I can save him. Eri said happily. Eri, you need to understand you're going to be using your quirk to return him for a long time. Can you do that? Aizawa asked. I've been saving up my power. Eri said, nodding. Aizawa put his hand on her head and smiled. Okay, Eri, I know you can do this, so be ready. Aizawa said, I'm going to sleep now then. Eri said as she tucked herself into her bedsheets and closed her eyes. Good night, Eri. Mirio said as he got up and left the room with Aizawa. Are you ready? Mirio asked. What do you mean? Aizawa replied. If it doesn't work, are you ready to do what we said we would do? Mirio added. Aizawa sighed and clenched his fist and cane. Yes, I'm ready. Aizawa said. The next day, Mirio, Aizawa, Hawks, and Recovery Girl showed up to Midoriya's room and were greeted by surgeons and Midoriya's mother. Mom, you're going to have to wait outside, Hawks said. Let me see him one more time just in case. Inko said. Midoriya lay on the bed with a tube in his mouth, motionless. His once toned body now frailer. "I love you, sweetie. I want you to know Mom was here," Inko said as she gave a kiss to her son's forehead. Inko walked out of the room with tears in her eyes and waited. Eri walked into the room with scrubs and said hello to everyone. "I'm ready," Eri said. "Everyone else ready?" Aizawa asked. Hawks got his feathers ready and Mirio stood nearby Eri just in case. The medics put sleeping gas on Midoriya's mouth to keep him under. Eri got next to Midoriya and placed her hand on his arm. "Okay, let's do this," Recovery Girl said. Eri activated her quirk and her horn began to shine along with Midoriya's body. The soft yellow light lit up the room and everyone watched Midoriya's frail body revert into a fit body. "Eri, I will erase your quirk when we need you to stop, so you focus on reversing," Aizawa said. Eri nodded her head and focused. Midoriya's fingers began to twitch and then his whole body began to spasm. "Don't worry, Eri, we are here," Mirio said. The process went on for about 5 minutes and there were no visible changes or events until one of the scars on his arms disappeared. "Almost there, Eri," Aizawa said. One by one the scars vanished until all the scars on his arm were gone. "How far are we going?" the medic asked Aizawa. "Check for scars," Aizawa said. The medics began to check Midoriya's body for any form of scars made by a blade. "There is none. He looks younger than before," the medic added. "Just a bit more," Aizawa said. Midoriya's once scarred and tired face was now young and innocent. "There," Aizawa said as he erased Eri's quirk. Eri fell into Mirio's arms with sweat on her forehead. "Did we fix him?" Eri asked. "We have to wait for him to wake up. Okay, now I'm going to take you to Nejire so you can nap," Mirio said. Mirio quickly took Eri to Nejire, who was waiting outside, and came back into the room. "Did he get shorter?" Hawks asked. "We're going to see if he's breathing manually now," Recovery Girl said. Midoriya took a deep breath and began to breathe normally. "Bring his mom in here now," Aizawa said. Inko walked in and looked at her son Midoriya, who looked no over 14. "He's breathing," Inko said as she looked at the blanket rise and fall with each breath he took. "Can you confirm his age for us, please?" Aizawa asked. Inko stared at her son's face and brushed his green hair. "He's 14, no way I can forget it," Inko said. Aizawa let out a sigh of relief and spoke. "Mom, is it okay if the doctors here examine him?" Aizawa asked. Inko nodded with tears in her eyes. "It's still Midoriya, right?" Inko asked. "We hope so," Hawks replied. All Might knocked and let himself in the operating room. "Well, how is All Might?" was about to ask when he saw Midoriya. That's him. The day I met him. The day I ruined his life. I put him through this. I'm sorry, I am so sorry," All Might said as he fell to his knees with tears in his eyes. No one said a word and just let the man finally let it out. "I should have told him the truth, I should have done things differently," All Might said. "Calm down," Hawks said. All Might wiped his tears away and got up slowly, still crying. "I'm sorry everyone," All Might said. All Might let himself out along with Recovery Girl and went to apologize to Midoriya's mom once again. "Listen, we are going to keep him sedated and run some tests. If you guys can stay here just in case, it would be great," the medic said. "That's fine with me," Hawks said. "No problem," Mirio added. "Yay, we won't sleep till it's all in the clear," Aizawa said. 2 days passed of MRI scans and x-rays on his body to make sure everything was normal. "We're going to wake him up now," the medic said. Mirio, Aizawa, and Hawks got ready to kill Midoriya in an instant if it was necessary. Midoriya opened his eyes and noticed his vision was blurry. "Where?" Midoriya said, rubbing his eyes. Midoriya instantly knew Hawks and Aizawa, but the third blonde boy was unfamiliar to him. "The pro hero Hawks, Eraserhead. Did I get in an accident? What happened?" Midoriya asked, confused. "Keep your eye on him," Aizawa. Hawks said. "I got it," Aizawa said. Midoriya looked around and noticed the medics were in a corner behind the unfamiliar blonde boy. "Hey, kid, do you remember what happened before you woke up just now?" Hawks asked. "Well, I was walking home from school after my best friend Gaten, Midoriya said, ignoring the part about being bullied. I met All Might after and he told me I couldn't become a hero. Midoriya said, tearing up. He's him. We did it. Hawks said, how can you be so sure? Mirio asked. His heartbeat. He's not lying, it's all the truth. Hawks said. Hawks' wings can sense vibrations. Midoriya said, smiling. Aizawa deactivated his quirk and took a long blink and opened them up again, and was happy to see Midoriya was no longer plagued by All for One. Eraserhead, why are you crying, and actually why do you have one eye? Midoriya asked. Eraserhead wiped the tear from his eye and laughed. It's a long story, but don't worry, it's just my quirk, Midoriya, it's my dry eye. Aizawa said, laughing. Midoriya laid back in his bed and looked at the ceiling. Mirio opened. The blinds in the warm sun could be felt. I had the weirdest dream, but I can't seem to put my finger on it. Midoriya said with a sigh. Aizawa walked into the hallway and gave a thumbs up. Midoriya? Inko said as she ran up and hugged her son. Whoa mom, are you okay? Midoriya asked, hugging her back. Yay sweetie, I'm just so happy to see you are okay. Inko said, honey, there are some people here to see you. Inko said, giving her son a big kiss on his cheek. All Might walked in and faced Midoriya with a bow. All Might, raise your head. Midoriya said, no, I did a horrible thing to you. I trampled over your dreams. I should have shown you how to become a hero. I should have guided you, but I didn't. I'm sorry. All Might said, it's okay, I understand. Being a hero without a quirk is hard. Midoriya said, I'm glad to see you are okay. All Might said with a smile, I need a moment with Midoriya. All Might. Aizawa said. Aizawa pulled up a chair and began to explain everything to Midoriya. His past and what had happened until now, why he couldn't say a word to anyone about his past. I did all that? Midoriya asked. You are my friend, we believed in you to do the right thing and you did. Aizawa said, I understand, I'm glad no one else got hurt because of me. Midoriya said. Aizawa got up from his chair and opened the door to let Class 1A in. Midoriya. The class shouted as they ran in and hugged their friend. Hello, everyone. Midoriya said, careful everyone, he's still a bit tired. Hawks said, wait, I need to talk to him first. Bukagu said. Kaken, Midoriya said, looking at his friend. Bukagu never felt so happy to hear that name before. I'm sorry for doing all those things to you. I was insecure about myself. I hurt you to feel better about myself, and I'm sorry. You can become a hero without a quirk. You can do anything you set your mind to because you're just that awesome. Bukagu said as he stared at Midoriya, it's okay, I forgive you. I think the other, me or past me also had forgiven you. Midoriya said with a smile. Bukagu felt a weight come off his shoulders and all the pent-up feelings just came out in one quick hug. Midoriya hugged his best friend back. Let go. I heard you're pretty awesome though. Midoriya said, not as much as you. Bukagu said, laughing. The class watched as Bukagu smiled and laughed like a kid with Midoriya. I'm sorry if I hurt any of you in any way. Midoriya said. Midoriya looked at the students and a pink and round-faced girl caught his eyes. Wait, do I? Midoriya said, tilting his head. Me? Mina asked. You just look very familiar, and so do you. Midoriya said, looking over at Mina and Uraraka. Well, you did have a thing for Mina and Uraraka. Mineta said. Mina and Uraraka blushed and hit Mineta in the head for saying something like that. Midoriya chuckled and looked over at everyone. I think my past self was glad to have friends like you guys. If you guys will have me, I would like to be your friends once again. Midoriya said. The class smiled with tears in their eyes and rushed over to Midoriya to hug him. You saved my life, I can't thank you enough. Tenya said, smiling. You taught me that even a nuthead like me can do amazing things. Kaminari said, you may be the best friend I've ever had. Todoroki said, Midoriya saved our lives too. Asui and Mineta said, you taught me to be more sure of myself. Kota said, everyone here has learned something from you, Midoriya, so we are all thankful. Yaozu said, bowing. Midoriya looked around and bowed back. Okay guys, I think that's enough for Today I still need to go over some things with Midoriya. Aizawa said, man, even I shed a tear. Hawks said, same here. Mirio added. Aizawa went on to explain about the witness protection program and his schedule transferred to the States. Of course, the Hero Association will cover all costs and protection. So I won't be able to see those guys ever again? Midoriya asked. I'm sure they will find a way to meet up with you. They are blockheads, that's for sure, Aizawa said, smiling. Later that night, Midoriya was asleep in his bed when he found himself in a dark place. Where am I? Midoriya asked. You probably don't remember me. The skinny man said. I'm sorry, I don't. Midoriya replied, don't worry, I won't keep you long. I'm just a small fragment of what's left of All for One. Soon I'll leave this part of your brain and be erased, but some people wanted to say goodbye first. The skinny man said, thank you for freeing our son. Even if he's behind bars, we're glad he won't hurt anyone ever again. Kotaro Shimura said, thank you so much. Nao Shimura said, bowing, I know my brother did bad things, but it was all because of that bad man. Thank you for stopping him. Nana, Shimura said. A large crowd of shadows also bowed toward Midoriya. People, you have saved Midoriya. They just wanted to say thank you before leaving. The skinny man said, I didn't do anything, my other self did. Midoriya said, speaking of. The skinny man said, a scarred boy walked out and came into Midoriya's view. Hey. Midoriya said, hi, who are you? Midoriya asked, I'm you, but from the past. I know you're probably feeling bad about me going to disappear and all, but I think this is better, we can start again. Midoriya said, smiling. But I'm not me, you went through all that just to disappear. How can I take your place? Midoriya asked. You're not taking my place, we are one and I'm happy we can start over. No more hardcore stuff, just a chill normal life. We've already been a hero and a villain, let's try something else this time. Midoriya said, laughing. I guess you're right there. Midoriya said, listen, stay by mom's side, she deserves some time with us after everything we put her through. Oh, and tell Aizawa to tell Stain that we are going to be okay. Midoriya said, wait, you're going already? Midoriya asked. Yeah, I'm out of here, but remember I'm you, so technically still there in a way. Midoriya said as he waved goodbye. Bye, everyone. Midoriya said, waving goodbye, if you ever want to chat just talk to Mirio. The skinny man said as he waved goodbye and disappeared. Midoriya woke up to the noise of chirping birds and saw his mother by his side asleep. Alright Midoriya, will try my best, thanks for taking care of us. I got it from here, don't worry, Midoriya said. 4 years later. Midoriya took a sip of his coffee and watched as his mother cooked some breakfast. It's a warm day today. Inko said, just the way I like it. Midoriya said, hey. The woman said, finally woke up? Midoriya asked, yeah, hero work is tiring, but I heard your voice and had to wake up to see you. The woman said. Midoriya felt a sweet kiss on his cheek and he looked down at his phone and saw Bakugo on screen. Hey, check it out. Midoriya, Bakugo always went on about being number one, haha. The woman said, laughing. Oh, he just texted me. Midoriya said as he opened the text, told you I'd been number one. You still beat me to it though. Kaken, Midoriya said, chuckling. Hey, why don't we go to the beach today? The woman asked. Sure, I'm up for it. Midoriya said, let me make some sandwiches while you guys pack the things. Inko said. Midoriya made his way to the garage and found some hero things and a photo of his old self with his students. Can't believe we wore a suit that young, haha, Midoriya thought as he moved the photo to a shelf. Midoriya bumped into another shelf on accident and then caught another framed photo in midair as well as a statue instantly. Safe. I still got it, I guess. Midoriya said as he placed the things back. Midori, you got the things? The woman asked. Yeah, I got them. Midoriya said as he picked up the umbrellas. Midoriya walked to the front door and was met by a pink skin-colored woman with horns. You always take forever, Midoriya. Mina said, smiling. Just an old photo I found got me thinking. Midoriya said, Well, we can talk about it later. Let's go to the beach. I want to have some fun on my month off. Mina said as she walked through the front. Alright, alright. Midoriya said, smiling. Mina turned around quickly and kissed Midoriya on the lips while hugging him. Let's go. Mina said as she got one of the umbrellas from Midoriya and grabbed his hand. On the car ride to the beach, Inko insisted on driving for some reason. Little did Midoriya know Mina asked her to do so. Mina leaned her head on Midoriya's shoulder and whispered in Midoriya's ear. I love you. Mina said as she gave him another kiss. Midoriya looked into Mina's dark eyes which he loved and spoke. I love you too, Mina. Will you marry me? Midoriya said. Mina blushed and smiled, her ears burning hot. Yes, 1,000,000 times yes. Mina said. The end. Quirkless, married, Mina Ashita.